Chapter 134. Even if the five peak masters were confused, they did not dare to question the arrival of the divine guardian beast and the decision itself. The crane soared into the skies and flapped its gigantic wings, causing a gust of wind to howl. Without any apparent movements, Su Zimo's figure was lifted off the ground uncontrollably and disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. After the crane left, the five peak masters exchanged glances and headed for Misty Peak as well. This matter was so strange that the five peak masters had to report it to the sect master. Even after the five peak masters left, the disciples of the five peaks were still gathered at the same spot, discussing fervently. Senior Crane is so amazing. To think that it knows our human language and can even speak it. I heard that demons can speak the human language after cultivating to a certain realm. That's not all. It's said that some strong demons can even transform into humans and look exactly the same. For many disciples who had joined the sect for a few years, this was the first time they were seeing the true appearance of the divine guardian beast, and they were extremely curious. Heis, senior brother Feng has suffered a huge blow this time round. Initially, he declared that he was going to take the number one of 3 peaks. But in the end, he only managed to take the number one of Spirit Peak. Didn't the number one of Spirit Peak lose to junior brother Su? It's not just senior brother Feng, it's a huge blow to Spirit Peak as well. That's right. Back then, the Peak Master even forbade junior brother Su from entering Spirit Peak. To think that he would even defeat the number one of Spirit Peak. The number one of 4 peaks. Who would have thought that the mysterious challenger would be junior brother Su? Heis. Ethereal Main Peak, Ethereal Palace. The 5 peak masters arrived at the same time. Patriarch Lingyun was seated at the top of the palace, seemingly resting with his eyes closed. Wen Xian cupped his fists. Patriarch, after the battle between Su Zimo and Feng Haoyu in Array Peak Spirit Arena today, in the end, I got it. Before Wen Xian could finish, he was interrupted by Patriarch Lingyun. Lingyun opened his eyes. His pupils were like 2 stars, deep and mysterious. He said in a low voice, the crane has already made arrangements for this. Patriarch, Su Zimo's body refining technique is not simple. Among the 5 major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty, the Southern Mountains sect is the strongest in body tempering. Since Su Zimo is not cultivating a demonic technique, could it be a secret technique of the Southern Mountains sect? The brown-haired youth was still worried and asked. I don't know either. Patriarch Lingyun shook his head. The 5 peak masters were speechless. Wen Xian frowned. Patriarch, Senior Crane is a demon after all. Ling Yun's expression changed as his gaze suddenly turned sharp. He narrowed his eyes and asked, Wen Xian, what are you trying to say? A powerful pressure came crashing down. Wen Xian's face turned pale and he was unable to continue speaking. The atmosphere in the Misty Palace suddenly became extremely oppressive and dropped to the freezing point. After a moment, Xian Yi said, Patriarch, Wen Xian doesn't mean anything else. It's just that Su Zimo's actions can't help but remind us of someone in the past. If Su Zimo is the second him, we'll have to be more careful in the future. There's no need to worry. Leave this matter to the crane. Pausing for a moment, Lingyun continued, even though the crane is a demon, you guys shouldn't doubt it when it followed our founding master to conquer the cultivation world and founded Misty Peak. Also, if the crane wasn't in the sect, do you think that Misty Peak would be able to become one of the 5 major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty? When they heard that, the 5 peak masters' hearts skipped a beat. They had long known that the crane had a special status in the sect. However, humans and demons were different after all. The notion that those of different races would definitely have different intentions was still deeply ingrained in them. The 5 of them had truly not expected the crane to be so important to the sect. You guys can disperse. Lingyun waved his hand. After the 5 peak masters left, a hint of fatigue appeared on his face. Deep in his eyes, there was a hint of worry. Enveloped by an invisible force, Su Zimo arrived in a valley before long. After stepping on solid ground, Su Zimo looked around. Surrounded by mountains, the valley was barren and barren. Rumble. Rumble. Boom. Boom. A series of deafening thunder reverberated through the valley. Su Zimo frowned. The spirit chi in this valley was extremely thin. Coupled with the interference of the thunder, it was almost impossible to cultivate. If he were to stay here, he would truly feel as though time was passing by slowly. After placing Su Zimo on the ground, the immortal crane circled in midair before descending suddenly. When it landed on the ground, it transformed into a beautiful woman with red hair that was coiled up in a bun, looking dignified and dignified. Su Zimo was stunned on the spot. The red-haired beauty before him was no different from a real human. If he had not known beforehand, Su Zimo would not have imagined that the person before him was actually a crane. With a wave of her hand, the red-haired beauty formed a barrier around the two of them, temporarily isolating them from the thunder outside. "Do you know why I brought you here?" The red-haired beauty looked at Su Zimo with a gentle gaze instead of coldness. "I don't know," Su Zimo shook his head. However, the red-haired beauty's next sentence caused Su Zimo to turn pale with fright and almost lose his composure. "The cultivation technique of the demon race that you cultivate is very powerful," the red-haired beauty's words were shocking. Su Zimo's expression changed and his heart skipped a beat. Instinctively, he lowered his head to hide the shock in his eyes. "Senior Crane, what do you mean by that? Is it testing me or has it discovered something?" Countless thoughts flashed through Su Zimo's mind as he froze on the spot. "If I'm testing you, your reaction is more than enough to explain everything." The red-haired beauty chuckled. "Don't worry. The reason why I brought you here is naturally because I don't want to expose your secret." Su Zimo asked, "When did you discover it, Senior?" "Half a year ago, you attacked on Spirit Peak and knocked out a Spirit Peak disciple with a single palm strike. Although it was a short process, there was still a trace of the demon race's bloodline aura that others might not be able to detect. However, as a demon, I'm naturally extremely familiar with that aura," the red-haired beauty explained. Pausing for a moment, the red-haired beauty continued, "You're still considered a human right now. However, as time passes by and the bloodline in your body fuses completely with the newly born demon race's bloodline, you'll completely turn into a demon and lose all traces of the human race." Su Zimo remained silent. He had already noticed that as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stopped cultivating the marrow cleansing section for the past half a year. No matter what, Su Zimo was still a human at the end of the day. Even if he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he didn't want to completely transform into a demon. As though she could read Su Zimo's mind, the red-haired beauty continued, "Even if you stop cultivating this demon race's cultivation technique, the demon race's bloodline is already fused into your body. If you're not careful, you'll be exposed. I don't have to explain the consequences of that, right?" Su Zimo nodded. Once they knew that he was a demon, there were only two ways for the sect to deal with him. They could either kill him or make him sign a blood oath to become someone else's spirit beast. Even if he escaped from the sect, Su Zimo wouldn't be able to move around freely in the cultivation world. Those were the only two ways for cultivators to deal with demons. Chapter 135. I can help you hide it this time round. But, what are you going to do next? Suddenly, the red-haired beauty's questioning raised a huge question in Su Zimo's mind. Su Zimo asked, "Senior, why do all cultivators have such a ruthless attitude towards demons with almost no room for negotiation?" When she heard that question, the red-haired beauty froze for a moment. Reminiscing, she sighed gently. The feud between the two races has a long history that can be traced back to the primordial era. Primordial era? This was the first time Su Zimo heard that term and he could not help but be confused. The primordial era was a word that carried a tragic aura and was filled with the vicissitudes of time. The red-haired beauty seemed to be filled with emotions as she murmured softly, "That was a magnificent era that lasted for a long time. Many life forms were just born and there were thousands of races, including the human race. However, for the human race, that era was a tragic and heavy period of time." For some reason, Su Zimo suddenly felt a tightness in his chest, as though he was suffocated by an invisible aura. Just by listening to the crane talk about that period of time, Su Zimo already felt that sort of pressure. It was hard to imagine what he would have faced if he had truly been born in that era and experienced it personally. Sensing Su Zimo's abnormality, the red-haired beauty snapped out of her trance and shook her head. "Let's not talk about it. All you have to know is that after the primordial era, Tianhuang mainland experienced the ancient era before reaching this day. The feud between the two races spanned 2 eras and the countless years of hatred have long seeped into the depths of their bloodlines. It's impossible to resolve it." Su Zimo nodded and asked with a thought, "Senior, do you have a way to resolve the latent problems in my body by bringing me here?" "There's one, but I don't know if it'll work." The red-haired beauty said, "A genius once appeared in the sect. That person was extremely talented and was not inferior to you. He was seen as the future hope of the sect. Unfortunately, that person betrayed the sect in the end and fell into the fiend Dao, never to return again." "Was that person a demonic cultivator as well?" Su Zimo asked in surprise. "No." The red-haired beauty shook her head and said, "This person has an eccentric temperament and acts in an extreme manner. When he showed signs of becoming a devil, the sect discovered this and locked him up here to reflect on his mistakes. With the help of the thunder here, this person actually managed to wash away the devil chi in his body." Su Zimo asked, "Senior, do you mean that the sound of thunder might be able to wash away the demonic aura in my blood?" The red-haired woman nodded. Pausing for a moment, the red-haired beauty continued, "However, the demon race cultivation method you cultivate is very powerful. I don't know if this method will work. But how do we make use of the sound of thunder here? I don't understand at all." Su Zimo looked confused. "I don't know about that." Su Zimo was speechless. Could it be that just by listening to the rolling thunder here, he could wash away the demonic aura in his body? The red-haired beauty continued, "Lightning is one of the most upright and violent types of energy. It's extremely effective against evil spirits. Beasts are naturally afraid of fire, while demons are naturally afraid of thunder. Among the myriad of spells, thunder reigns supreme." Su Zimo had a rough idea of what she meant. What the crane meant was that the power of thunder might be able to resolve the issue within his body. The crane merely provided an idea and direction, but it did not know how to resolve it. Right then, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he recalled something. After the weapon peak face-off, Su Zimo obtained a mystic gold silk armor. From the disheveled old man, he found out that the owner of the mystic gold silk armor was an extremely frightening expert of the sect back then who was invincible in the Foundation establishment and Jin Dan realms. However, the disheveled old man seemed to have some reservations about this person's unwillingness to talk about it. Suddenly, Su Zimo asked, "Senior, did the genius you mentioned wear a mystic gold silk armor back then? That's a Khanate spirit weapon?" A look of surprise flashed through the red-haired beauty's eyes as she asked, "You know about that?" "Indeed." The expert that the disheveled old man mentioned was the same as the genius that the crane mentioned. "Senior, can you tell me about that person back then?" Suddenly, Su Zimo felt an intense curiosity towards that person. "It's nothing much," the red-haired beauty smiled. "Ever since the sect set up the 8 Distresses formation, you're the second person to survive it." "He's the first." Su Zimo nodded, he had heard the disheveled old man mention this before. "Do you know how he managed to survive?" the red-haired beauty asked. "I don't know, the 8 Distresses formation is an illusion formation. Within it, you'll meet countless people and many of them are your closest kin. You'll experience the 8 distresses of life such as birth, old age, sickness and death. But this person..." At that point, The red-haired beauty paused for a moment before continuing, this person killed everyone he saw in the illusion. Ah! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but exclaim. Those who were trapped in the 8 distresses formation would not realize that they were in an illusion because everything they saw was way too real. And this person had killed everyone in the illusion. How terrifying was this person? Could he have already realized that he was in an illusion? Su Zimo asked. I'm not sure, the red-haired beauty shook her head. However, he had yet to condense his chi back then and shouldn't have realized it. Forget it, these are all old affairs of the sect. Just listen to them, the red-haired beauty said, I can vaguely guess that you want to cultivate both immortality and demonic cultivation in the future. However, no one has taken this path and your future is unknown. The latent bloodline in your body is only one of them. As your cultivation realm increases, there will be more troubles in the future. Sigh. Su Zimo knew that as well. It was the wisest choice to stop cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness right now. However, this cultivation technique had a special meaning to him. This cultivation technique changed the trajectory of Su Zimo's life and even the fate of many people around him, including Su Zimo himself. Most importantly, this was imparted to him by Dai Yu. At the thought of Dai Yu, Su Zimo could not help but compare her to the red-haired beauty before him. If he was not wrong, Dai Yu should belong to the demon race as well. Both of them could take human form, but he did not know whose cultivation realm was higher. Senior, if a person is born without a spirit root, can you help them plant one? Su Zimo changed his method and did not ask directly. After all, he did not know Dai Yu's cultivation realm or Senior Crane's cultivation realm. Plant a spirit root? The red-haired beauty smiled. Let's not talk about me, there's no one in the entire Tianhuang mainland who can do that. Spirit roots are natural objects. If it's fated, it's fated. If it's not, it's not. If a spirit root is planted postnatally, it's equivalent to changing a person's fate. Who in the world can change fate? The red-haired beauty smiled again. I'm afraid even perfected immortals can't. Chapter 136. Su Zimo did not know what a perfected immortal was. However, when he heard that, he understood one thing, Dai Yu was much stronger than Senior Crane. In fact, she was much stronger. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo asked again, Senior, if I can't purge away the demonic chi in my bloodline with the help of the thunder here, do I have to stay here forever? After all, the crane merely provided a direction. Su Zimo had to figure out how to resolve this issue himself. 1 year. I'll give you a year. The red-headed beauty said, if you can't do it within a year, you'll have to think of other ways. Su Zimo nodded. Don't be discouraged. That person did it back then. Your potential isn't any weaker than his, so you might be able to do it as well, the red-headed beauty consoled him before leaving. Without the light barrier, the rumbling thunder reverberated in his ears once more, shocking his mind. The valley was not large and Su Zimo looked around but could not find a place to rest. Thus, he assumed a lotus position and listened to the thunder in the valley, trying his best to find the secret behind it. Day after day, day after day. Su Zimo sat in Thunderclap Valley the entire time without any improvement in his cultivation. The demonic chi in his bloodline was still there and showed no signs of dissipating. During this period, Linghu and Little Crane would often sneak over to visit him and bring him food. Normally speaking, other disciples were not allowed to visit those who were trapped in Thunderclap Valley to reflect on their mistakes. However, Little Crane had a special identity and neither it nor Linghu were considered sect disciples. Even though Su Zimo trapped Little Crane in the formation previously, Little Crane had also eaten some elixirs and benefited greatly. Coupled with the fact that Su Zimo was so pitiful, its attitude towards him had changed greatly. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. Within Thunderclap Valley, Su Zimo opened his eyes and sighed gently. He still had no clue. If this were to continue, Su Zimo might not be able to think of a solution even if he were to spend 10 years, let alone a year. Seems like that sect expert back then was indeed stronger than me. Su Zimo gave a self-mocking laugh. Thinking of this person, Su Zimo took out the mystic gold silk armor from his storage bag. There was no one around the Thunder Valley, and Su Zimo was not afraid of being spied on. He stood up and channeled the power of his bloodline, causing his veins to bulge and his flesh to expand. Su Zimo could clearly feel that the powerful force in his bloodline could destroy the heavens and earth. It was also because of this power that Su Zimo was able to defeat Feng Haoyu, who had entered the Foundation establishment realm. Su Zimo took a deep breath and used his strength to lift up the mystic gold silk armor. He looked at it up and down. It was Su Zimo's first time observing the broken innate spiritual weapon so closely since he obtained it. This mystic gold silk armor was very thin and soft to the touch. It was hard to imagine that such a thin inner armor actually weighed over 10,000 pounds. Just as Su Zimo was sizing up the mystic gold silk armor, 2 pieces of paper fell out from the inner armor and landed on the ground. Su Zimo exclaimed softly and glanced sideways. Putting down the mystic gold silk armor, he picked up the 2 pieces of paper. The 2 pieces of paper looked old and gave off an ancient aura. One of them was even tattered and there were clear signs of it being torn at the bottom. There was a sentence written on the first piece of paper. The second piece of paper was filled with words. Su Zimo looked at the first piece of paper. This is a cultivation technique that I obtained from an ancient ruin. It's called the Void Thunder Manual. Although it's incomplete, it contains a volume of the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra and a few other thunder techniques that are rather strong. I left it for the fated. When he saw that line of words, Su Zimo came to a realization. If he wasn't wrong, then this void lightning incantation should be recorded on the second page of the tattered paper. Those 2 pieces of paper were left behind by the expert of the sect back then. Su Zimo had a conflicted expression and lamented in his heart. For so many years, the mystic gold silk armor had been placed in the spirit weapon chamber and was almost covered in dust. If not for the fact that Su Zimo had joined the sect after his demonic cultivation, no one would have touched the inner armor or discovered the secret within. Every Qi refinement warrior would choose something that was useful to them in the spirit weapon chamber. Who would choose the mystic gold silk armor? Qi refinement warriors had no use for it. Even if perfected Jin Dan had cultivated body tempering techniques and had a strong physique, he would not be interested in this broken Khanate spirit weapon. However, Su Zimo could already refine inferior-grade spirit weapons on his own. He was not interested in the spirit weapons in the spirit weapon chamber, and that was the reason why he chose this strange inner armor. This was completely a coincidence, a stroke of luck. The last 3 words of the sentence, the fated person, seemed to have an additional meaning at this moment. Su Zimo smiled. The temperament of this expert of the sect was indeed strange. Although he had betrayed the sect, he left this cultivation technique behind. Furthermore, he did not choose to leave it behind directly. Instead, he used another method. In reality, Su Zimo had just entered the cultivation world and had only come into contact with the Qi condensation manual. He had not even learned any spirit arts. How could he comprehend anything from the sound of thunder? It was the same for this expert of the sect back then. If he did not have this Void Thunder Manual, how could he have purged the fiend Qi in his body when he was trapped in Thunderclap Valley? As Su Zimo pondered, the first piece of paper in his palm shattered into dust and scattered in the air. It had been too long and the piece of paper had long been eroded by time, turning into dust under the vibration of the thunder. Logically speaking, the second piece of paper should have been around for a longer time. However, it was still in its original state. Su Zimo rubbed it carefully and discovered that the material of the piece of paper was special. It was rough and tough, and even after so many years, the words on it could still be seen clearly. Su Zimo looked at the crack at the bottom of the piece of paper and his heart skipped a beat. He exerted strength with both hands and suddenly pulled at the piece of paper. It did not budge at all. At that moment, Su Zimo was in his demonic form and could even snap a pseudo-spirit weapon if he exerted strength with both hands. However, the piece of paper was perfectly fine. Ancient ruin. Su Zimo recalled a piece of information mentioned by this expert of the sect and fell into deep thought. He learned from Senior Crane that Tianhuang mainland had already experienced two eras. The first was the primordial era and the second was the ancient era. Since it was an ancient ruin, there was a high chance that the Void Thunder Manual was a cultivation technique left behind from the ancient era. Su Zimo's eyes lit up gradually. Just the piece of paper that recorded the Void Thunder Manual in the ancient era was already so extraordinary, this cultivation technique must have a great background as well. Su Zimo began to look at the piece of paper. The first line he saw was Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra. When he saw those words, Su Zimo nodded to himself. Right now, he was cultivating the marrow cleansing section of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness. What was recorded on the piece of paper was a sutra for marrow cleansing as well. There was a high chance that the fusion of the two sutras could resolve the latent problems in his body completely. Su Zimo suppressed his excitement and began to cultivate the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra amidst the rumbling thunder. Chapter 137. A few days later. In Thunderclap Valley, a green-robed scholar sat on the ground and let out a series of strange sounds as he breathed in and out. Huff, rumble. If anyone were to stand beside the green-robed scholar, they would be able to hear the shuddering sounds of tigers and leopards coming from his body as he breathed in and out. In between the sounds of tigers and leopards, there was a rumbling sound of thunder. Bewitching and ferocious, the two completely different sounds vibrated his bone marrow and created new blood. His bloodline circulated and surged like a tsunami. Cultivating the Void Thunder Manual was easier than Su Zimo had imagined. Be it the marrow cleansing section of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness or the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra of the Void Thunder Manual, the principle was to make use of the power of sound to vibrate the bone marrow and achieve the effect of cleansing the marrow and changing the blood. With the foundation of the marrow cleansing section and the sutra on the remnant page, Su Zimo quickly grasped the mysteries behind it. For others, the strange environment of Thunderclap Valley was unbearable. However, for Su Zimo who cultivated the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, it was like a divine aid. As time passed by, Su Zimo gradually integrated the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra into the marrow cleansing section and formed a unique breathing technique of his own, Tiger Leopard Thunder. Su Zimo could clearly feel the demonic chi in his body being cleansed by the thunder. However, the power of his bloodline was perfectly preserved. Furthermore, with the help of the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, the power of his bloodline became even stronger and more terrifying. In just a month's time, Su Zimo had already attained lesser mastery of the marrow cleansing section. According to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, lesser mastery of the marrow cleansing section could allow one to kill early-stage foundation establishment cultivators with ease and fight against mid-stage foundation establishment cultivators in terms of strength. However, Su Zimo's situation was slightly different. Because he cultivated the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, the power of his bloodline was stronger and he had an additional violent power of thunder. There was a high chance that he could fight against late-stage foundation establishment cultivators. Of course, this was purely a comparison of strength. In a fight between cultivators, strength was only one aspect. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had been in Thunderclap Valley for 3 months. During this period of time, what made him the happiest was that the demonic chi in his blood had been completely washed away. After cultivating the Tiger Leopard Thunderous Roar, the newly born bloodline would still contain demonic chi, but at the same time, it would be washed away by the Thunderous Roar. From now on, not only could Su Zimo continue cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, he could also use the power of his bloodline at will without any reservations. This would become his greatest trump card. From this day onwards, Su Zimo wore the mystic gold silk armor on the inside and a green robe on the outside. He carried the weight of 10,000 pounds on his back and trained hard in the Thunder Valley. At first, Su Zimo was not used to it. Wearing the mystic gold silk armor was equivalent to carrying a mountain. It was extremely difficult to move around, let alone cultivate the various killer moves in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. However, as time passed by and the power of his bloodline grew stronger, Su Zimo gradually got used to it. Whether he walked or sat, he looked no different from usual. Even if someone saw Su Zimo again, they would not realize that he was wearing an inner armor that weighed 10,000 pounds. The tempering of his skin, flesh, tendons and bones was extremely obvious through such heavy cultivation. There were improvements in the first 4 sections of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness: body tempering, tendons transformation, bones strengthening and marrow cleansing at the same time. Of course, that was not the only surprise that the ancient cultivation technique, Void Thunder Manual, brought to Su Zimo. There were also a few thunder arts recorded on the remnant page. Initially, Su Zimo did not pay much attention to it. After all, thunder arts were also a type of spirit art. His cultivation realm was not at foundation establishment realm and his spirit chi had not transformed into spirit energy, he could not release it even if he cultivated it. However, after cultivating the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, Su Zimo realized that there was a power of thunder in his bloodline. The power of thunder was hidden in his bloodline and did not belong to the category of spirit energy. However, with the power of thunder in his bloodline, not only could Su Zimo cultivate the thunder arts on the remnant page, he could even release them. This meant that Su Zimo, who was still a chi refinement warrior, could release spirit arts that only foundation establishment cultivators could release. Furthermore, it was the most ferocious type of spirit arts, thunder arts. After all, he did not have a thunder spirit root. Su Zimo was not sensitive to thunder and it was extremely difficult for him to cultivate thunder arts. However, this was Thunderclap Valley after all and Su Zimo was here to welcome the first thunderclap of spring. In the skies, blazing thunderbolts flashed and snaked like snakes, as though they were tearing the heavens apart. They descended with an aura that could destroy everything. In order to experience the power of thunder better, Su Zimo tried to guide thunder into his body. It was an extremely dangerous move. Each time, Su Zimo would be charred black from the electricity and his flesh would be torn apart with injuries all over his body. Even with the mystic gold silk armor, he could not defend against it. Thankfully, after cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's recovery speed was shocking and he could recover fully after resting for a few days. In this valley, Su Zimo endured unimaginable torture and pain. He wanted to become stronger. He wanted to be strong enough to take revenge for Zhui Feng, strong enough to stand before Chen Mengqi once more and strong enough to follow in Dai Yu's footsteps. Each time Su Zimo wanted to give up, he would recall Dai Yu's words. If you want to be a dragon or elephant, you have to be a horse or an ox for all living beings. Cultivation was a heaven-defying act to begin with, let alone immortality and demonic cultivation. From the moment he embarked on this path, Su Zimo was destined to endure more pain and pressure than others. After cultivating the few thunder arts on the remnant page, everything on the remnant page was imprinted in his mind. At the end of the remnant page, there was a unique thunder art mentioned, Thunderclap Kill. The release of thunder arts was almost always accompanied by the power of thunder. However, Thunderclap Kill released the power of thunder purely. The power of sound. The power of sound was the easiest to ignore. However, it contained an unimaginable might. Using sound to vibrate one's bone marrow and create bloodlines was a manifestation of the power of sound. After all, the release of thunder arts required one to conjure hand seals and circulate mental cultivation techniques. However, the release of sound was an instantaneous power. If it was used properly in battle, it would bring about unexpected results. Unfortunately, the remnant page was torn off and Su Zimo had no way of knowing about Thunderclap Kill. However, Su Zimo had once witnessed a powerful spirit demon release a ferocious roar in Sang Lang mountain range and kill a spirit beast on the spot. That scene was still fresh in Su Zimo's mind and gave him some inspiration. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already been in Thunderclap Valley for half a year. To the disciples of the sect, Su Zimo must have had a hard time improving his cultivation during this period of time when he was trapped in Thunderclap Valley. However, no one knew that Su Zimo had completed his transformation in Thunderclap Valley. Although his cultivation realm did not increase, his combat strength had more than doubled. Chapter 138. This day, a resounding cry of a crane could be heard, even suppressing the rumbling of thunder in the valley. After half a year, the crane had descended upon Thunderclap Valley once more. By the time she landed on the ground, she had already transformed into a red-haired beauty. When she swept her gaze across Su Zimo, she exclaimed softly, "You succeeded?" Su Zimo nodded and bowed. "Thank you, Senior." Even though the Void Thunder manual was not left behind by the crane, if not for her appearance half a year ago, Su Zimo would not have come here, nor would he have been able to make use of the rumbling of the thunder to resolve the issue in his bloodline. "Not bad," the red-haired beauty praised. "Let's go. There's no point in staying here any longer." With that, she waved her sleeves and left Thunderclap Valley with Su Zimo. The wind howled, and in the blink of an eye, the two of them arrived above Weapon Peak. "You can head down now. Try to raise your cultivation as soon as possible and enter Foundation Establishment Realm to become an inner sect disciple." The red-haired beauty continued, "Even though Ethereal Sword isn't a match for your sword formation, the true strength of Ethereal Sword isn't its strength. Instead, it's its unpredictable sword-wielding technique. Firstly, he did not manage to unleash the true might of Ethereal Sword and chose to fight you head-on. Secondly, he has only cultivated level 1 of Ethereal Sword, Afterimage." Su Zimo nodded. How could something that could be considered as one of the 3 great secret skills of the sect and even the foundation of Ethereal Sect's position as one of the 5 major sects be ordinary? After pondering for a moment, the red-haired beauty continued, "After becoming an inner sect disciple, you must not slack off. You have to raise your cultivation as soon as possible and fight for a position as a legacy disciple so that you can obtain the right to learn the sect's secret skills. Apart from Ethereal Sword, the other 2 secret skills are rather important to you as well. In fact, there's even a secret skill that can increase your melee combat strength tremendously." When he heard that, Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Melee combat was his greatest trump card. The stronger that trump card was, the stronger he would be and the safer he would be in the cultivation world. After a few more reminders, the crane turned and left. Su Zimo descended on Weapon Peak slowly. There wasn't much change in Weapon Peak in half a year. Su Zimo saw some familiar faces around the crafting hall. Junior brother Su is back." When Shui Yi saw Su Zimo, a smile appeared on his face. He greeted him and quickly walked over. The surrounding Weapon Peak disciples looked over as well. After half a year, the disciples of Weapon Peak had improved in their cultivation. Shui Yi had already reached the pinnacle of perfected qi condensation and could step into Foundation Establishment at any moment. Everyone knew that Su Zimo must have suffered a lot in the past 6 months in Leying Valley, so they did not mention it at all. They just casually talked about the changes in the sect. Half a year ago, after Feng Haoyu suffered a crushing defeat, he did not collapse. Instead, he focused even more on his cultivation and completely gave up on unorthodox techniques such as pill refinement and weapon refinement. After becoming an inner disciple, it took Feng Haoyu less than half a year to reach the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Within the inner disciples, he was quite famous and powerful. A month ago, Feng Haoyu had just advanced to mid-stage Foundation Establishment when he defeated a late-stage Foundation Establishment senior brother in Ethereal Main Peak, making a name for himself. Even though Feng Haoyu was only at mid-stage Foundation Establishment, there were already rumors in the inner sect that he was the number 1 apart from legacy disciples. It wouldn't be long before Feng Haoyu became a true legacy disciple. Even Leng Ro with a variant spirit root could not compare to that frightening cultivation speed. Of course, Leng Ro was also an inner sect disciple and was at the peak of early-stage foundation establishment. After chatting with Shui Yi and the others for a while, Su Zimo left and returned to his cave abode. Ling Hu and Little Crane were guarding the place. When they saw Su Zimo return, they were naturally delighted. The tiger and crane pondered that they would have elixirs to eat from now on. Not long after Su Zimo sat down, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from outside. The person arrived at the entrance of the cave abode with heavy footsteps. Su Zimo smiled faintly and guessed the person's identity. Waving his robes gently, the door of the cave abode opened. "Bro, I missed you so much." Little Fatty ran over and gave Su Zimo a bear hug passionately. "Bro, you're amazing." Nothing happened even after staying in Thunderclap Valley for half a year, Little Fatty chuckled. "You're not too bad yourself. You're already at early-stage foundation establishment." It was easy to detect Little Fatty's cultivation realm using the spirit-peering art. "Hee hee." Little Fatty chuckled. Seeing that Su Zimo was still at level 9 Qi condensation and had not improved at all in half a year, he thought that Su Zimo was feeling depressed and consoled. "Bro, don't be discouraged. Given your potential, it's only a matter of time before you catch up to us." Su Zimo smiled. Su Zimo had already expended a lot of inferior-grade spirit stones to break through to level 9 Qi condensation. If he wanted to break through to perfected Qi condensation, he would need even more spirit stones. But now, Su Zimo's storage bag was empty. Without enough spirit stones and perfect Qi gathering elixirs, it would be difficult for him to catch up to Little Fatty and the others. Noticing that Su Zimo seemed to have something on his mind, Little Fatty pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Right, bro, a few of us inner sect disciples are going out for a sect mission tomorrow. Why don't you come with us and relax?" "Inner sect mission?" Su Zimo shook his head. "I'm still a trial disciple. I'm not qualified to do an inner sect mission." Little Fatty waved it off with a smile. "It's fine, bro. It's not like you'll be in the way. Besides..." Pausing for a moment, Little Fatty said mysteriously, "Bro, this sect mission is rather simple. If you come along, you can even get some spirit stones to use." "Oh." Su Zimo was tempted. Right now, he was in need of spirit stones. Su Zimo asked, "What kind of mission is it?" A disciple of the sect who is out for training discovered a spirit mine outside Linfeng City and is currently mining it. Since this senior brother is alone, he's worried that other itinerant cultivators might covet the spirit mine. Therefore, he asked the sect to send a few cultivators to support him and bring the spirit stones back to the sect at the same time. Little Fatty winked. "I've already asked around in the sect. For a mission like this, the sect won't care even if we secretly take some spirit stones from the mine." Su Zimo was deep in thought. Thinking that Su Zimo was worried about his safety, Little Fatty chuckled. "Bro, don't worry. It's just an inferior grade spirit mine and most of the spirit stones mined are inferior grade. Even if there are some middle grade spirit stones, it's extremely limited. With a foundation establishment cultivator leading the team, there won't be any danger at all. Furthermore, our ethereal sect is one of the 5 major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty. Even if there are itinerant cultivators who have the intention of snatching the spirit mine, they won't have the guts to do so. When we reach Linfeng City of Qi Country, even the city lord will have to treat us well when he sees us. We'll just keep watch there for a couple of days and return with the spirit stones after the mining is done." "Alright," Su Zimo agreed. Little Fatty raised his brow and gave a strange smile. "Bro, we'll gather at the front mountain tomorrow morning. There's still a surprise, hee hee." Chapter 139. The next morning. In the main peak of Ethereal Sect, 4 foundation establishment cultivators flew on their swords. 3 men and a woman, speeding towards the front mountain of the sect. Among the four of them, the only woman was extremely eye-catching. Her robes were as white as snow, spotless and beautiful. Her skin was crystalline like ice, but her expression was extremely cold and she exuded a cold aura that kept others away. That woman was Ling Ro. Among the three men, one of them was plump. He wasn't tall and had a smiling face. It seemed that he would smile at anyone and was very kind. He was little fatty. Of the other two men, one of them was Lu Yangrong, who was at mid-stage foundation establishment. The other was Guan Jin. Although he was at early-stage foundation establishment, he specialized in talismans and was a grade 2 talisman master. Both of them were suitors of Ling Ro. The fact that they were shameless enough to follow Ling Ro to Linfeng City was naturally because they wanted to compete with each other secretly. Sister Ling Ro, senior brothers, I've also called a friend to come with us. Please don't blame me, Little Fatty said with a smile while they were still on the way. Little Fatty was rather popular in the sect and was familiar with everyone. When Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin heard that, they merely frowned. Although they were unhappy, they did not say anything. Ling Ro had a better relationship with Little Fatty, so she naturally wouldn't object. Before long, the four of them arrived at the front mountain of the sect. A green-robed man stood in front of the entrance. His features were delicate and his expression was indifferent. Beside him was a Linghu. Although he was just lying there, the Linghu was almost as tall as the green-robed scholar. His body was massive and his half-closed eyes flashed with a ferocious glint from time to time. Bro, over here. When Little Fatty caught sight of the green-robed man, he landed hurriedly and waved. When Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin saw that the azure-robed man was only at the 9th level of qi condensation, a trace of contempt flashed in their eyes. Naturally, they would not lower themselves to land on the ground, nor would they take the initiative to greet him. Ling Ro's ice-cold gaze swept over the crowd. She was startled when she saw the green-robed man. Then, an imperceptible splendor flashed through her eyes. After half a year, the green-robed man did not seem to have changed at all. Even his cultivation realm remained at level 9 qi condensation. But for some reason, Ling Ro felt that this man seemed to have become even more mysterious. If the him half a year ago was said to have shone with boundless radiance, half a year later, he was as deep as the sea, unfathomable. Ling Ro descended slowly and withdrew her flying sword. She arrived in front of the green-robed man and nodded. Little Fatty hid behind Ling Ro and winked at the green-robed man with a lewd expression. Although there was no sound, one could tell what he meant from the shape of his mouth. Look, it's enough of a surprise, hee. The green-robed man smiled and nodded to Ling Ro. Greetings, Senior Sister Ling. Among the 5 peaks, seniority was determined according to the time of entry into the sect. However, all trial disciples would have to address inner sect disciples as senior brother or sister. When Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin saw that in midair, they were dumbfounded and shocked. In the sect, Ling Ro was famous for her indifference towards others and did not treat them well. The two of them had never seen Ling Ro take the initiative to greet a sect disciple. Furthermore, this person was a trial disciple. Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin did not intend to land initially. However, at that moment, they came to the ground at the same time with a tacit understanding. Who is this trial disciple? Lu Yangrong purposely emphasized the words trial disciple, and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Fatty hurriedly introduced, this is senior apprentice brother Lu Yangrong, and this is senior apprentice brother Guan Jin. The green-robed man smiled and cupped his fists. I am Su Zimo. Greetings, senior brothers. Su Zimo. Both of their expressions changed and their pupils constricted. The moment Su Zimo's name was mentioned, the entire place went silent. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. After the 5 peaks face-off, there were still some inner sect disciples who had not seen Su Zimo in person. However, there was no one else who had not heard of this name. The number 1 of 4 peaks. This was unprecedented. He was only at Chi Condensation Realm and yet he was able to defeat an opponent at Foundation Establishment Realm. Furthermore, this opponent was currently in the limelight within the inner sect and was already the #1 of the inner sect. After the battle half a year ago, many inner sect disciples descended on Weapon Peak, wanting to catch a glimpse of Su Zimo in person. However, their efforts were in vain. Later on, when they found out that Su Zimo had entered Chi Deviation and was locked up in Thunderclap Valley, everyone laughed it off and no longer bothered about it. Everyone knew that there was no way to raise one's cultivation realm while locked up in Thunderclap Valley. Even if a peerless genius was locked up there for an indefinite period of time, their cultivation path would be crippled. It's only been half a year and this Su Zimo is already released. Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin were secretly shocked. Given the talent that Su Zimo had displayed in the past, it was only a matter of time before he caught up to them. Lu Yangrong scoffed, no wonder junior sister Leng has a different attitude towards this person. So, he's Su Zimo. He doesn't look like anything special. I heard that his body tempering is rather strong. Why does he look like a weak scholar? Guan Jin frowned and sized up Su Zimo with a scrutinizing gaze. A moment later, Lu Yangrong suddenly said, Junior brother Su, I've heard a lot about you. Pausing for a moment, Lu Yangrong changed the topic. I heard that junior brother Su was already at level 9 Chi Condensation half a year ago. Why hasn't your cultivation improved at all after such a long time? This sentence was completely asking the obvious, and it was full of provocation. Guan Jin exclaimed softly and asked curiously, Junior brother Su, I heard that you went berserk from your cultivation. Why are you so careless? You've just come out of Thunderclap Valley. Let me give you a piece of advice. It's better for you to head back and cultivate in seclusion lest anything goes wrong and affect your Dao path. Su Zimo was smart. From the way they looked at Leng Ro, he could vaguely guess what they were thinking. When he heard their sarcastic questions, Su Zimo smiled and replied casually, Thank you for your concern, senior brothers. When he saw Su Zimo's reaction, Little Fatty heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, Little Fatty was so nervous that his palms were sweaty. He knew a little about Su Zimo's personality as well. Little Fatty was afraid that the two of them would get into a fight because of a disagreement. Back then, when Su Zimo faced the disciple of the law enforcement hall, Qin Yu, he even dared to draw his knife. The aura of these two before him could not suppress him at all. However, to Su Zimo, things were different now. Back at Spirit Peak, Ling Hu was injured and Qin Yu was clearly biased towards him, even wanting to cripple his cultivation. Su Zimo naturally could not tolerate that. Even though the two senior brothers before him were hostile towards him as well, they were just petty thoughts and were nothing much. Su Zimo merely smiled indifferently. Su Zimo no longer looked at Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin. He merely reached out and caressed Ling Hu's forehead. Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin were enraged, they felt like they were being ignored. Neither of them knew that if Su Zimo had not reached out to comfort Ling Hu, given Ling Hu's wild nature, he would have pounced on the two of them long ago. Chapter 140. Caw, caw. Right then, the cry of a crane could be heard not far away. Roar. Ling Hu growled and looked at Little Crane that was flying over, as though he was greeting it. Little Crane had been staying in Misty Peak all this while and had never left the sect. Now that it finally had the chance, it naturally wanted to sneak out to play as well. However, Su Zimo did not dare to make the decision on its own and asked it to return to ask Senior Crane. The moment Little Crane heard that, it became crestfallen. Its mother was extremely strict with it and once said that it was not allowed to leave the sect until it reached Jin Dan realm. Initially, Little Crane did not harbor much hope. To think that its mother would agree to it unexpectedly when she heard that it was going to travel with Su Zimo. Naturally, Little Crane was overjoyed and chased after them. Isn't that the Little Crane from the sect? Why is it here? Lu Yangrong exclaimed softly. Guan Jin replied, perhaps it's just passing by. Lu Yangrong coughed gently and swept his gaze across Su Zimo and the others, saying in a deep voice, it's said that this little crane has an extraordinary background and is the child of the mystical guardian beast of Misty Peak. Guan Jin could tell that Lu Yangrong was bragging and could not help but scoff. Which inner sect disciple doesn't know about that? Lu Yangrong raised his brow and harumphed with glee in his eyes. I've interacted with little crane before and even fed it once. Given its intelligence, it might even recognize me. In reality, Lu Yangrong was not the one who took the initiative to feed little crane. Su Zimo stayed in Thunderclap Valley for half a year. Little crane had no elixirs to eat and was feeling suffocated. Coincidentally, it met Lu Yangrong and had just gotten a decent elixir when it was robbed by little crane. Because of that, little crane was even taught a lesson by its mother. Guan Jin's expression darkened and he did not say anything else. Lu Yangrong could not help but feel delighted when he felt that he had the upper hand. Right then, little crane arrived above their heads and cried twice before descending slowly. Seeing this, Lu Yangrong suppressed the excitement in his heart and no longer looked at Guan Jin. He turned slightly to the side and looked at Leng Ro with a smile. Junior sister Leng, say, this little crane is really intelligent. I only fed it once and it remembered it. It even ran over specially. Ha! The moment he said that, little crane descended before them. Lu Yangrong smiled brightly and greeted, long time no see, little crane. Little crane tilted its head and looked at Lu Yangrong, as though it was trying to recall who the person who was smiling so disgustingly was. He thought for a while, but couldn't think of anything. Ignoring that person, little crane strode over to Su Zimo. Lowering its head, it rubbed its sharp beak against Su Zimo's arm gently, blinking its eyes and crying softly. Whether or not Su Zimo could bring it out to play this time would depend on whether or not he could bring it along. Little crane was acting coquettishly. Everyone at the side was dumbfounded and their jaws nearly dropped to the ground. Anyone who had stayed in Misty Peak for a few years would know about little crane. However, none of them had seen little crane being so intimate with any cultivator in the sect. Why did its temperament change all of a sudden? Could it not be the child of the mystical guardian beast? That couldn't be right. Furthermore, there was only one crane in the sect. Suddenly, Guan Jin laughed. "Oh, this is bad. Who was the one who said that he fed little crane shamelessly? Little crane even recognizes him. TSK, tisk. Lu Yangrong was embarrassed and blushed, wishing that there was a hole in the ground to hide in. What's there to gloat about? Perhaps it got the wrong person. Lu Yangrong retorted and walked before little crane, smiling with cupped fists. Little crane, it's me. You must have gotten the wrong person, right? You even ate an elixir at my place a while ago. Have you forgotten? It would have been better if Lu Yangrong did not mention it. The moment he did, little crane recalled how its mother taught it a lesson because of that. Caw, caw. Suddenly, little crane cried out with a sharp, piercing voice and a ferocious glint in its eyes. Lu Yangrong was caught off guard and shuddered in fright, retreating a couple of steps back. Ha ha ha. Guan Jin could not help but burst into laughter when he saw Lu Yangrong suffer. None of the inner sect disciples knew about the relationship between little crane and Su Zimo. Among the people present, little fatty was the only one who knew about it. Su Zimo patted little crane's head gently and scolded jokingly, "Silly bird, what's there to be fierce about?" This had always been how the man and crane got along. However, that scene left Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin dumbfounded. Even though Lu Yangrong was an inner sect disciple at mid-stage foundation establishment, he had to address little crane respectfully as fellow Taoist. Yet, Su Zimo called it a silly bird. Furthermore, this lad even hit little crane. The strangest thing was that little crane was not enraged and was even rubbing against the lad's arm. Little fatty looked at Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin and shook his head, lamenting to himself, if you guys knew that my bro locked Little Crane up for more than 3 months, you guys would probably be scared silly. Agreed? Suzumo asked. Little Crane nodded hurriedly with anticipation in its eyes, waiting for Suzumo to agree. Suzumo said, "Alright, let's go together then." Pausing for a moment, Suzumo felt that something was amiss and turned to Leng Ro and the others, asking, "Senior sister Leng, senior brothers, is it alright to bring Little Crane along?" No problem." Lu Yangrong was completely dumbfounded as he replied instinctively. Leng Ro's lips curled into a faint smile as she nodded as well. Notwithstanding the fact that Little Crane's strength was equivalent to a Foundation establishment spirit demon, no one present would dare to stop it given its status. "Since everyone's here, let's go and try to reach Linfeng City as soon as possible." Little Fatty coughed gently and rubbed his hands. Leng Ro nodded. Lu Yangrong rolled his eyes and an idea popped up in his mind. Suddenly, he said, "Junior brother, you're right. We've got to reach Linfeng City as soon as possible. However, junior brother Su's cultivation realm is too low. How can he catch up to us on sword kinesis flight?" "That's right." Guan Jin nodded as well. "Even though this trip isn't dangerous, I think it's better if you don't go, junior brother Su. We'll be too slow if we bring you along." Initially, Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin were competing in secret. However, after Suzumo's appearance, both of them felt a sense of danger at the same time. Both of them had a tacit understanding that they would attack Suzumo the moment they found an opportunity. Just now, they were implying that Suzumo was a burden to them. However, that was something that Suzumo could not refute. After all, he was only at level 9 chi condensation and his speed on sword kinesis flight was far from that of Foundation establishment cultivators. However, if he were to run on the ground, Suzumo could rely on divine steed fleeting to travel faster than early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators without the power of his bloodline. It's fine. Little Fatty smiled. "I'll be able to catch up to both of you if I carry you, senior brothers. You're already the slowest among us. Wouldn't it be even slower if you carry someone?" Guan Jin frowned. Lu Yangrong smiled. "How about this? Since I'm the strongest, I'll carry junior brother Su." After saying that, Lu Yangrong glanced at Leng Ro intentionally. Although Lu Yangrong's words seemed like he was helping Suzumo, there was a hint of bragging behind it. Chapter 141. Little Crane was displeased when it heard that the person before it was complaining that Suzumo was too slow. It wasn't because it was unfair for Suzumo. However, if Suzumo backed out and refused to go out, it wouldn't be able to go out to play as well. The little crane cried out and lowered its body. Linghu understood and was the first to jump up with a delighted expression. Little Crane shook its body and gave a look of disdain. However, it did not chase Linghu down. It then looked at Suzumo and gestured for him to hurry up. This time round, even Lu Yangrong and the others understood, let alone Suzumo. Little Crane was going to carry Suzumo and fly. The flying speed of a Foundation establishment spirit demon was much faster than Lu Yangrong and the others. Furthermore, who would have thought that the child of a divine guardian beast would be willing to swallow its pride and carry a chi refinement warrior in flight? What sort of treatment was that? Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin's eyes reddened, their eyes filled with envy and jealousy. If it was the two of them, they would have hopped up eagerly. However, Suzumo frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking softly, "I'm a little heavy. Can you carry me?" Suzumo was wearing the mystic gold silk armor that weighed at least 5,000 kilograms. If he wanted to remove the mystic gold silk armor, he would have to remove his green robes. However, Leng Ro was around and it was inconvenient. There was no way Little Crane would believe that. Pursing its lips, it raised its head and thought to itself, how heavy can a mere chi refinement warrior like you be? Caw, caw. Little Crane cried, urging Suzumo to hurry up. Su Zimo coughed gently and reminded, be careful. With that, Su Zimo leaped onto Little Crane's back. Thump! Little Crane was trampled and fell to the ground, eating a mouthful of dirt. Little Crane was enraged and was just short of scolding in human language. How was this a little heavy? This was way too damn heavy. In reality, Little Crane's bloodline was extraordinary. Given its cultivation realm and strength, it would not be a problem for it to carry something that weighed 5,000 kilograms. It was just that Little Crane was not prepared for this at all. Now that there was an extra 10,000 kilograms of weight on its body, it would definitely fall. Su Zimo looked embarrassed and said, why don't I come down? Caw, caw. Little Crane was displeased. This was obviously questioning its ability. Little Crane channeled its bloodline and flapped its wings, taking off in a wobbly manner. Under the envious gazes of Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin, it flew out of the sect. Little Fatty summoned his flying sword, waved his arm and shouted, let's go. It did not take long for Little Crane to get used to the weight on its body. Although it was not fast, it was far ahead of Leng Ro and the rest. The 5 men and 2 beasts set off for Linfeng City. Misty Peak wasn't too far away from Linfeng City. Given the speed of an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, it would take about a day to get there. Along the way, the 5 of them also met some other self-cultivators. When those self-cultivators saw the sect badges on their waists, they gave way to them respectfully. Be it itinerant cultivators or small sects, all of them had heard of Misty Peak. To them, Misty Peak was a massive entity and no one was willing to offend such an existence. In the blink of an eye, a day passed. As dusk approached, an ancient city gradually came into view. It was the destination of their journey, Linfeng City. Little Crane gradually slowed down. Su Zimo looked at the ancient city in the distance and suddenly narrowed its eyes in deep thought. Leng Ro and the rest caught up from behind. Lu Yangrong closed in beside Little Crane and withdrew an elixir from his storage bag, smiling at Little Crane. Fellow Taoist, you must be tired. Why don't you have an elixir to replenish your stamina? Turning its head slightly, Little Crane's eyes lit up as it reached out and grabbed the elixir from Lu Yangrong's palm. Raising its head, it swallowed it. Lu Yangrong was delighted when he saw Little Crane eat the elixir. Along the way, he was extremely envious of Little Crane carrying Su Zimo. Being carried by a flying spirit demon was much cooler than sword kinesis flight. Furthermore, it saved energy as well. Coughing gently, Lu Yangrong said, fellow Taoist, do you want me to take a rest as well? Little Crane turned its head away and ignored him. You silly, Lu Yangrong swallowed the scolding that was about to come out of his mouth. Su Zimo dared to call Little Crane a silly bird but he did not have the guts to do so. At the side, Guan Jin sneered at Lu Yangrong's joke. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly said, everyone, be careful. Something's not quite right with Linfeng City. What's not right? Lu Yangrong was still fuming after being humiliated by Little Crane. When he heard Su Zimo's words, he retorted immediately, you're a level 9 Qi refinement warrior. Don't give orders if you don't know anything. That's right. At this moment, Guan Jin was on Lu Yangrong's side and did not give up on attacking Su Zimo. What's wrong with Linfeng City? I feel that it's very normal. It's already evening and there's no light in the city. It's a little strange, Su Zimo shook his head. Leng Ro frowned slightly, she had clearly noticed that as well. Lu Yangrong snorted softly. It's not really night yet. Why do we need lights? Before long, the 5 of them arrived above Linfeng City and descended slowly. This time round, even Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin noticed the abnormality in the city. It was too quiet. The streets of the ancient city were empty without a single soul. Even at dusk, it should not be this quiet. It was as though the entire city was empty and everyone had vanished. It was dead silent. Su Zimo and the other 4 landed in Linfeng City and looked around. The shops on both sides of the streets were tightly shut, as though they had not opened yet. The atmosphere in the ancient city was extremely strange and even sinister. Su Zimo's nose twitched, but he did not smell any blood. "What's going on?" Little Fatty asked with a grim expression. Logically speaking, the city lord of Linfeng City should have been prepared by now and sent someone to welcome them. But now, there was no one in the entire Linfeng City. Lu Yangrong shook his head but gripped his flying sword tightly with a tense expression. Linghu's ears twitched as he scanned his surroundings, scratching the ground with his claws in an uneasy manner. It was the same for Little Crane as it flapped its wings. Pondering for a moment, Lu Yangrong made a decision and said softly, "Let's go and check out the city lord's residence first." He was the one with the highest cultivation realm here. Even though no one said it, he seemed to be the leader. This time round, the 5 of them did not use sword kinesis flight. Apart from Su Zimo, everyone else had expended quite a bit of spirit chi and chose to travel on foot. The 5 of them walked on the empty and quiet streets, keeping an eye on their surroundings and listening to their surroundings, paying attention to any movements. All of a sudden, a commotion sounded from behind the 5 of them. Suddenly, Lu Yangrong felt the hairs on his neck stand on end as he spun around and looked behind. Not far away, a triangular cloth with the word "wine" fluttered in the wind, letting out a series of sounds. It was a false alarm. Lu Yangrong and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Another strange gust of wind blew and Lu Yangrong suddenly realized that he was drenched in cold sweat unknowingly. What the f***ck? Lu Yangrong cursed and continued walking. Chapter 142. Before long, Lu Yangrong stopped in his tracks. There were 2 people sprawled on the streets not far ahead. They were motionless and their faces could not be seen. One of them held a gong in his hands while the other held a baton. By the looks of it, they should be the night watchmen of Linfeng City. It was not really night yet, so how could the night watchmen appear? What was up with them sprawled here? "Hey, the 2 night watchmen in front. Are you dead or alive?" Lu Yangrong gripped his flying sword and did not rush forward, merely shouting from where he was. Guan Jin sneered at the side, "What can an ancient city of mortals have that's worth being so cautious about?" Even though that was what he said, Guan Jin gripped a protection talisman in his palm as he walked forward and flipped one of them over. "Ah!" Guan Jin exclaimed and retreated a couple of steps. Su Zimo and the others could see clearly from the back that the person was already dead. Everyone had seen corpses before. However, this was the first time they had seen someone die in such a bizarre manner. The night watchman's cheeks were shriveled and his skin was wrinkled as though all his essence had been drained away. His grayish-white eyes were filled with confusion. Even at the moment of his death, this person probably did not know the cause of his death. Guan Jin took a deep breath of air and flipped the other person over with his leg. His death was almost the same as the former. It felt as though the 2 of them were walking on the streets when they met with misfortune and died on the spot without even having the chance to react. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he walked towards a shop at the side and kicked open the door, circling around inside. Everyone inside was already dead. Be it men or women, old or young, most of them died in their sleep in the exact same manner as the night watchman outside. By the time Su Zimo returned to the long street, Ling Ro and the others had just walked out of the other houses with grim expressions and lingering fears. "They're all dead." Little Fatty swallowed his saliva. Even though the 5 of them were cultivators and there were even 4 foundation establishment cultivators, they had never experienced something like this before. Moreover, if they were not wrong, the people in the entire ancient city were most likely dead. Su Zimo quickly sketched out an image in his mind. Last night, Linfeng City was still as peaceful as ever. Almost everyone in the ancient city was asleep and the night watchman was walking on the streets when misfortune befell him. No one was spared. Most of them died in their sleep. The entire city had at least 100,000 people. In a single night, all of them had died. Lu Yangrong said in a low voice, "It must be someone from the demon sect." Yes, the people of the demonic sect are cruel and ruthless. They would resort to any means necessary. This way of death is clearly not caused by the cultivation techniques of the righteous path. Guan Jin nodded his head. Suddenly, Su Zimo asked, "What did the disciples of the sect who discovered the spirit mine say in their letters?" Little Fatty replied, "It's nothing much. It's just that a spirit mine has been discovered in the southern suburbs of Linfeng City and is currently being mined. It should be done in about 2 days." This junior brother said that he discovered some cultivators near the spirit mine and was worried that someone would take the risk. Therefore, he asked the sect to send a few Foundation establishment cultivators as reinforcements. After he said that, Little Fatty suddenly realized something and asked with widened eyes, "Bro, are you trying to say that the culprit of this tragedy is trying to steal our sect's spirit mine?" "That's very likely." Su Zimo nodded his head. "It's too much of a coincidence for this to happen right after the spirit mine was discovered near Linfeng City. What should we do then? Are we still going to the spirit mine?" Little Fatty asked. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "Send a letter to the sect first and tell them that there's a change in the situation. The few of you have expended quite a bit of spirit chi along the way. It's best for you guys to recover first before investigating the spirit mine. Junior brother Su, you're too weak. If you're afraid, don't follow us." Before Su Zimo could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Lu Yangrong's cold laughter. Guan Jin glanced at Su Zimo from the corner of his eyes as well. His eyes were filled with mockery as he said leisurely, "Junior brother Su, since you're so worried, why don't you hurry back? I've long advised you not to follow us, Fufu." Su Zimo frowned. Suddenly, Leng Ro said, "I agree with junior brother Su's suggestion." As she said that, she took out a paper crane from her storage bag and wrote a few lines of words on it using her spirit chi. Releasing the paper crane, it flew into the skies and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When he saw that, Lu Yangrong consoled her, "Junior sister Leng, don't worry. Within the territory of the great Zhou dynasty, there's no cultivator who would be so blind as to lay their hands on the spirit mine of Misty Peak." "That's right." Guan Jin was very calm as he analyzed, "This is only an inferior-grade spirit mine and it's mostly filled with inferior-grade spirit stones. It's not very attractive to Foundation establishment cultivators. Even if someone has designs on it, they're merely chi refinement warriors and nothing to fear." The spirit chi within inferior-grade spirit stones did not have much of an effect on Foundation establishment cultivators. If Foundation establishment cultivators wanted to raise their cultivation, they would require middle-grade spirit stones. At the realm of perfected Jin Dan, they would require superior-grade or even supreme-grade spirit stones. In reality, what the two of them said made sense. However, Su Zimo had a feeling that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. "Let's go. Let's head to the spirit mine and everything will be clear." Waving his hand, Lu Yangrong summoned his flying sword and led the way. Guan Jin followed closely behind while Little Crane carried Su Zimo and Linghu. Before long, the 5 of them arrived at the spirit mine. Arriving at the dark entrance of the spirit mine, Lu Yangrong paused in his tracks and turned back. "Junior brother Guan and I will walk at the front. Junior brother Su is the weakest, so he'll stand in the middle. Junior sister Leng and Little Fatty will bring up the rear." No one had any objections to that arrangement. The entrance of the cave was narrow and Little Crane and Linghu could not enter. They could only guard the entrance. Su Zimo could tell that even though Lu Yangrong appeared nonchalant earlier on, he was now cautious. Lu Yangrong summoned his flying sword and hovered it in front of his chest. 2 spirit patterns shone on it. It was a middle-grade flying sword. The 5 of them headed deeper into the spirit mine. They had not walked far when a strange sound came from the front, as though a huge flock of something was flying over. A faint red glow could be seen. Lu Yangrong focused his gaze. it was a flock of pitch-black crows. However, their eyes shone with a strange red glow. "Squat down and let them pass." Lu Yangrong lowered his body and everyone behind him did the same. A flock of blood-eyed crows sped over their heads without stopping. Lu Yangrong heaved a sigh of relief and shrugged his shoulders. Pretending to be relaxed, he turned around and said with a smile, "In places like spirit mines, these feathered beasts often appear. It's very normal. Ignoring them is a waste of spirit energy." Right then, Su Zimo felt a sense of danger and hollered, "Watch out!" Swash! A sword beam flashed at an extremely fast speed and arrived before them instantly. At that moment, the blood-eyed crows had just flown past and everyone was at their most relaxed state. By the time Lu Yangrong heard Su Zimo's warning, it was already too late. Chapter 143. Poof! There was a crisp sound and there was a flash of blood. Lu Yangrong had just turned around when his head was pierced by a flying sword and he died on the spot. The flying sword did not stop there and continued to stab at the few people behind. Su Zimo was the first to bear the brunt of it. Su Zimo's spirit perception had long warned him. He whipped out his cold moon saber immediately and slashed at the incoming flying sword heavily, smashing it down. The speed of the sword was way too fast. It was obvious that it was not a chi refinement warrior. If Su Zimo wanted to use his flying sword to defend, he would have to release a sword formation. However, it would take a long time to set up a sword formation and he would not be able to deal with the sudden situation before him. Lu Yangrong's blood splattered on Su Zimo and Guan Jin. Apart from Su Zimo, the remaining 3 people were stunned on the spot, their eyes filled with horror. Even with Leng Ro's temperament, she looked flustered at this moment. Nobody could imagine that a person who was talking and laughing with them earlier on had turned into a corpse in the blink of an eye. Swash! Swash! 2 more sword lights flashed, targeting Su Zimo and Guan Jin. Guan Jin stood rooted to the ground in a daze. He did not even crush the talisman in his palm right away. Su Zimo reached out and pulled him behind him, hollering, "Hurry and retreat." Clang! Clang! Su Zimo slashed twice with his backhand and deflected the 2 incoming flying swords. The power of those 2 swords was not weak. The person who attacked was at least at early stage foundation establishment. There was a change in the situation. Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin's previous speculations were all invalid. There were at least 3 foundation establishment cultivators in this spirit mine. Furthermore, the 3 of them did not care about Misty Peak at all. They were merciless and used killing moves the moment they attacked. It was only at this moment that Guan Jin and the other 2 reacted. Guan Jin crushed a protection talisman right away and a light screen shrouded the surroundings. Following that, Leng Ro and Little Fatty retreated outside rapidly. The sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from the depths of the cave. From the sound of it, there were quite a number of people. When the people inside saw that their flying swords could not kill Su Zimo and the others, they had already chased over. Su Zimo retreated while retrieving a sanguine bow. Long before the 5 peaks face-off, Su Zimo had already turned the cold moon saber and sanguine crystal bow into inferior-grade spirit weapons. In the blink of an eye, 3 arrows was all ready. Swoosh! 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 3 streaks of cold light entered the darkness of the cave entrance, and the sound of sharp arrows piercing through the air rang out. Ah! Ah! 2 where 2 of the arrows was blocked, the other was. Everyone! Someone in! In that narrow cave, there was not much space for cultivators to dodge, and Su Zimo's arrows caused quite a bit of damage. Sprinting at full speed, Su Zimo and the others saw the light of day again before long. 2. The group of blood-eyed crows that just now had flown above their heads were surrounding Little Crane and Linghu, attacking them relentlessly. Little Crane was a spirit demon after all and could still protect itself against the attacks of the blood-eyed crows. However, Linghu did not know how to fly and was already riddled with injuries, howling on the spot and struggling to defend himself. Frost wind. When Ling Ro saw that, she conjured hand seals and pointed into the air with a soft holler. A chilling gust of wind blew through the air and swept past the blood-eyed crows. Many of them were covered in a layer of frost and fell to the ground one after another, disintegrating into pieces. They were already dead. That was the might of spirit arts. Thanks to Ling Ro's help, Little Crane managed to break out of the encirclement. Panting slightly, it could not help but have a look of fear in its eyes. It had spent most of its time in the sect and had never seen such a bloody scene. Get on, Little Crane, and leave this place for now, Su Zimo said hurriedly. Ha 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 ha. Right then, a series of arrogant laughter sounded from the depths of the cave. A group of people walked out of the cave. The person in the lead wore gray robes and declared loudly, "None of you are leaving today. All of you shall stay here." Late-stage foundation establishment. Little Fatty's pupils constricted as he exclaimed. The gray-robed cultivator who spoke was at late-stage foundation establishment. Among them, the only mid-stage foundation establishment Lu Yangrong had already died at the entrance of the spirit mine. Not only that, there was an endless stream of cultivators walking out of the cave. At a single glance, there were more than 30 of them. The most frightening thing was that all of them were foundation establishment cultivators. Apart from the gray-robed cultivator who was at late-stage foundation establishment, 9 of them were at mid-stage foundation establishment and the rest were at early-stage foundation establishment. None of them were Qi refinement warriors. It's over. Guan Jin looked at the 30 or so foundation establishment cultivators surrounding them. His face was pale and his heart was filled with despair. Little Fatty wielded his gigantic axe in one hand and his flying sword in the other with a nervous expression. Ling Ro's flying sword hovered in front of her. Although her expression was cold, her palms were sweaty as well. Of the 4 people present, Su Zimo was the only one who was relatively calm as he surveyed his surroundings. We're cultivators from Misty Peak. Who are you people? Guan Jin took a deep breath and asked with a strong front. Fufu. The gray-robed cultivator in the lead chuckled and raised his brow mockingly. So what if you're from Misty Peak? Yesterday, a Misty Peak disciple was blind and was killed by me. Indeed, the disciple who sent the message was already dead. Back when Lu Yangrong died in the cave abode, Su Zimo had already realized that today's matter was definitely not going to end well. Still holding on to a glimmer of hope, Guan Jin pretended to be weak and said, "Fellow Taoists, you guys are only after this spirit mine. We from Misty Peak can just give it up. Why must you be so ruthless? Furthermore, this spirit mine is only an inferior grade spirit mine. It's useless to us." Fufu. Guan Jin forced a laugh. An inferior grade spirit mine? The gray-robed cultivator shook his head and sneered, "Correction, this is a middle-grade spirit mine." Ah! Guan Jin's expression changed. He finally realized why all the people present were foundation establishment cultivators. If it was a middle-grade spirit mine, it would be extremely attractive to foundation establishment cultivators. If they had known beforehand that this was a middle-grade spirit mine, the disciples sent by Misty Peak would definitely be experts among the inner sect disciples and might even be led by legacy disciples. Su Zimo did not say anything the entire time and watched coldly from the sidelines. He observed carefully and saw that the 30-odd foundation establishment cultivators before him were dressed differently. Furthermore, they did not have any identity badges. It was clear that they were itinerant cultivators. What was it that gathered these itinerant cultivators to fight over this spirit mine? The gray-robed cultivator before him was probably not qualified. Even though a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator was strong, the others would not take the risk and offend Misty Peak because of him. Guan Jin forced himself to remain calm and said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoists, to be honest, we've already sent a message to the sect. Our cultivators will be here soon. Fufu, by then, you'll already be a bunch of dead people. Before Guan Jin could finish, he was interrupted by the gray-robed cultivator. The gray-robed cultivator chuckled. Furthermore, by the time Misty Peak cultivators arrive, we'll already be long gone. Ha ha ha. The surrounding Foundation establishment cultivators roared in laughter. The gray-robed cultivator stared at Guan Jin's expression with a strange look in his eyes as he asked with a smile, also, fellow Taoist, haven't you noticed anything wrong with your body? Chapter 144. When he heard that, Guan Jin's expression changed starkly and his body trembled slightly. Su Zimo glanced sideways and saw that Guan Jin's cheeks were drying up at a visible speed as wrinkles appeared. It was as though all the blood in his body was being sucked away by an invisible force in an instant. Ah! Guan Jin roared and released his spirit energy with all his might. However, he could not stop this strange situation. Turning around, Guan Jin looked at Su Zimo and the other two. His eyes were filled with fear as his pupils turned grayish-white and dull. This was exactly the same as how the mortals died in Linfeng City. Fu. Guan Jin extended his arm, as though he wanted to say something. However, a strange sound came from the depths of his throat. The little fatty jumped in fright and subconsciously took half a step back. Nobody attacked Guan Jin at all. However, in the blink of an eye, he had turned into such a state, it was clear that he was doomed. This was way too sinister. Little Fatty felt a chill run down his spine as he panted heavily to calm himself down. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He took a closer look and noticed that there were faint green spots on the skin of Guan Jin's palm that emitted an evil aura. Back in Linfeng City, Guan Jin's palm had come into contact with the corpse of a night watchman. If that was all, it was enough to cause the death of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Such methods were truly frightening. If one was careless, they might fall for it. The surrounding Foundation establishment cultivators watched this scene calmly, as if they had already expected this outcome. Even though Leng Ro looked cold on the surface, she could not bear to see Guan Jin's helpless expression. She took out a few elixirs from her storage bag and wanted to feed them to Guan Jin. She did not know what was going on with Guan Jin's current state either. However, he was her senior brother after all and she could not leave him in the lurch. Just as Leng Ro was about to step forward, someone tugged at her arm and pulled her back. Don't go. Su Zimo's voice sounded beside her ears. With a thud, Guan Jin collapsed to the ground, no longer breathing. Leng Ro froze in place. A dark green ball of light floated out of Guan Jin's body and flew into the depths of the spirit mine. A cold glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he lamented internally, there should be someone else in the depths of the spirit mine. That person is the murderer of Linfeng City. He. The gray-robed cultivator said with a strange smile, oh, you're quite protective of the fairer sex. Beauty, if it wasn't for this brat pulling you back just now, you would also be a dead man now. Leng Ro was shocked. Although her cultivation base was higher than Su Zimo's, she had never experienced any life and death experiences. Seeing her two senior brothers die tragically, she couldn't help but lose her composure. Realizing this, Leng Ro looked at Su Zimo gratefully. The gray-robed cultivator rubbed his chin and said lecherously, but that's good as well. It would be a pity if a beauty like you were to die. TSK, I just happen to be lacking a maid to warm my bed. I think you're pretty good looking. Ha. The group of Foundation establishment cultivators at the side roared with laughter. Swoosh. Right then, a gust of wind came from the entrance of the spirit mine as another large flock of blood-eyed crows swarmed out. Like locusts, they covered half the skies in the blink of an eye and loomed over everyone's heads. Little Fatty felt his scalp tingle as he gulped and asked softly, Bro, what should we do? Leng Ro looked at Su Zimo as well. At that moment, the two of them had already subconsciously treated Su Zimo as their backbone and had even forgotten that their cultivation realms were higher than Su Zimo's. There's no choice. Su Zimo shook his head and replied indifferently, "We can only kill them all." Leng Ro and Little Fatty's eyes dimmed. Leng Ro sighed internally. They're all Foundation Establishment cultivators. Apart from 9 mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators, there's even a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Su Zimo is only a Qi refinement warrior. What can he do? Be it Leng Ro or Little Fatty, both of them thought that Su Zimo was prepared to die and was merely making a casual remark. Leng Ro bit her red lips gently and said softly, "I'll try my best to hold back more people with my talisman later on. You guys ride on Little Crane and find a chance to kill your way out." Little Crane looked at the dense crowd of blood-eyed crows in the skies and cried continuously. It flapped its wings and was prepared to attack at any moment. Although the blood-eyed crows were not strong, they had the advantage in numbers. Once Little Crane was entangled and bitten, it would not be able to unleash its full strength. Ling Hu was on the ground and could not help either. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly withdrew the sanguine crystal bow from his storage bag, nocked an arrow and nocked it. The entire action was as smooth as flowing water, as though he had practiced it countless times. Swoosh! 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 3 sharp arrows were shot towards the crowd and arrived before them in the blink of an eye. Initially, the 30-odd Foundation Establishment cultivators in the surroundings had the intention to tease him. Most of their attention was on the 2 Foundation Establishment cultivators, Leng Ro and Little Fatty. Who would have thought that a Qi refinement warrior would make the first move? It was a calculated move. The 3 arrows pierced the throats of the 3 early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators accurately, causing blood to splatter. The 3 of them were filled with confusion. Even at their final moments, they could not believe that they had died under the bow and arrows of a Qi refinement warrior. "It's him!" someone in the crowd exclaimed. Previously in the spirit mine, Su Zimo had used his bow and arrows to kill 2 people. Therefore, the Foundation Establishment cultivators recognized him immediately. Swash! 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 The 30-odd Foundation Establishment cultivators summoned their flying swords at the same time. Spirit lights flashed continuously and sword chi was eerie. Su Zimo hollered softly, "Don't just stand there. Attack!" Leng Ro and Little Fatty summoned their flying swords and talismans hurriedly and scattered them towards the surrounding crowd. The light of talismans shone brightly and all sorts of spirit arts collided, causing deafening booms to fill the air. "Caw, caw!" Little Crane cried out and soared into the air, charging towards the blood-eyed crows in the skies to kill them. Little Fatty hollered and charged towards an early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator with his gigantic axe, wanting to kill that person on the spot with his melee combat strength. However, there were many people on the other side and their flying swords were constantly attacking. Little Fatty could not close in at all and was surrounded in the blink of an eye, barely defending himself. The gray-robed cultivator did not move and merely stood outside with his hands behind his back, watching coldly. There was no suspense in this battle and he did not have to make a move. On the other side, Su Zimo had already put away his sanguine crystal bow. Even though the bow and arrows were sharp, it was difficult for them to succeed and the Foundation Establishment cultivators were prepared. 6 flying swords hovered before his chest and streaked through the air, leaving behind sword scars. Buzz! A gigantic hexagonal formation pattern shone in a bedazzling manner. Su Zimo released the hexagonal sword formation the moment he attacked. Given the current situation, there was no point in using the tripartite sword formation. Sword formation. The gray-robed cultivator's expression changed and a strange look flashed through his eyes as he murmured softly, "That Qi refinement warrior is a sword formation master?" An early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator had his eyes on Su Zimo right from the start and secretly summoned his flying sword, stabbing towards the back of Su Zimo's head. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Su Zimo's head, the latter dodged from the spot in a strange manner with agile movements. That person's expression changed. Just as he was about to turn his flying sword and continue chasing after Su Zimo, a gigantic hexagonal sword formation descended and crushed towards him. Poof! Blood flashed. That person was sliced into two by the hexagonal sword formation. Chapter 145. Although the Foundation Establishment cultivator had many tricks up his sleeves, he was unable to unleash them and was slain by Su Zimo's sword formation in a single move. Buzz! 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 The hexagonal sword formation released streams of sword chi one after another, helping little Fatty repel the many flying swords and rescuing him. In that short period of time, little Fatty already had an additional wound on his body. It's fine, my skin is tough. Bro, be careful. Don't worry about me. Without turning back, little Fatty shouted and continued to charge forward. Leng Ro had indeed displayed the strength of a disciple of a major sect. Although she did not cultivate any secret skills of the sect, she was able to defend against the attacks of 9 mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators with her talismans. Of course, it was clear that the 9 of them were not using their full strength either. They were merely playing a game of cat and mouse, taunting Leng Ro with vulgar words as they fought on their flying swords. Leng Ro was unmoved and was not in danger for the time being. On the other side, more than 10 early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators had already shifted their attention to Su Zimo and were attacking him with all their might. Flying swords tore through the air and spirit arts exploded wildly. No matter how strong the hexagonal sword formation was, it could not defend against the strength of so many Foundation Establishment cultivators and was on the verge of collapse in the blink of an eye. Ha! One of the Foundation Establishment cultivators burst into laughter. Let's see how long a puny chi refinement warrior like you can last. Roar! Before he could stop laughing, a black shadow darted out from the side and bit his throat, causing fresh blood to spurt out. It was Ling Hu who had seized the opportunity to kill an early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Although Ling Hu was only a spirit beast, if a Foundation Establishment cultivator were to get close to him, they would be doomed as well. That was also the reason why Dai had once told Su Zimo that it was easiest for demon cultivators to kill opponents above their level. Beast, how dare you behave so atrociously? A few Foundation Establishment cultivators cursed and released spirit arts, causing the surrounding spirit chi to rumble and smash towards Ling Hu viciously. With Ling Hu's current strength, there was no way he could withstand the power of spirit arts. Squinting his eyes, Su Zimo dodged the incoming flying swords and flung out the hexagonal sword formation. He arrived before Ling Hu and blocked a few spirit arts. Boom! There was a loud bang. The spirit art collapsed, and Su Zimo's hexagonal sword formation could no longer hold on, unable to take shape again. The 6 flying swords were scattered on the ground, their radiance dim. Ling Hu was quick-witted. He took advantage of this opportunity to slip behind Su Zimo and glared fiercely at the dozen or so Foundation Establishment cultivators. Brat, the spiritual chi in your body has already dried up. An early Foundation Establishment cultivator sneered. Although it had only been a short time since the start of the battle, Su Zimo had blocked too many flying swords and had consumed a lot of spiritual energy. At this time, he really didn't have much left. Let's see how you can continue being arrogant. Die! A Foundation Establishment cultivator conjured hand seals and pointed at Su Zimo. A fireball the size of a fist was formed and streaked over. Even in midair, the air was already crackling from the heat. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he suddenly reached out, grabbing the incoming fireball. You must have a death wish. The Foundation Establishment cultivators could not help but sneer when they saw how Su Zimo dared to defend against a spirit art with his bare hands. Slowly channeling his bloodline, Su Zimo's palm flickered with a dense, blazing flash of lightning. What's that? The power of thunder. The pupils of many Foundation Establishment cultivators constricted as they exclaimed. Piak! The fireball was crushed by Su Zimo's palm and its spiritual chi dissipated into nothingness. The expressions of the cultivators changed when they saw that. The gray-robed cultivator frowned as well, looking at everything in disbelief as he muttered to himself in confusion, Thunder Art? Could he be a Foundation establishment cultivator and not a chi refinement warrior? Using his spirit-peering art, the gray-robed cultivator scanned Su Zimo's body once more. That's right, he's at level 9 chi condensation. Could he have cultivated some sort of concealment technique? No, no. The gray-robed cultivator shook his head again. Why didn't I sense any spirit chi when he released his thunder art? The gray-robed cultivator would never have guessed that the source of Su Zimo's thunder art came from his bloodline. Although Su Zimo's spirit chi was indeed depleted, the power of thunder in his bloodline was still present. Caw, caw. Right then, Little Crane in the skies was in danger time and time again. Its body was already riddled with wounds from the blood-eyed crows as it cried out anxiously. Even though Senior Crane did not say anything, Su Zimo knew that the reason why Little Crane could follow him out was because Senior Crane trusted him. But now that Little Crane was in danger, Su Zimo released the power of his bloodline with all his might without hesitation. There was a faint sound of waves rumbling from within his body that shook one's heart. Right in front of everyone, Su Zimo's body expanded and his entire body expanded. His green robes burst and his entire body was filled with lightning that crackled chaotically. As though he was possessed by the god of thunder, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with killing intent and his aura was frightening. What? At that moment, the gray-robed cultivator's expression changed starkly. He finally realized that something was amiss. Pointing to the skies, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with killing intent as he hollered, "Instant thunder!" Snap! The first thunderclap exploded. An incomparably resplendent thunderbolt struck the blood-eyed crows, snaking like a snake and spreading in a bedazzling manner. One after another, the blood-eyed crows were electrocuted to death and fell from midair like a black rain. Many of the Foundation establishment cultivators present were shocked by the deafening sound of thunder. The 9 Foundation establishment cultivators that were attacking Leng Ro stopped instinctively. Leng Ro seized the opportunity to catch her breath. She was drenched in sweat and her spirit chi was almost depleted. Little Fatty seized the opportunity to charge in front of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Swinging his gigantic axe, he cleaved that person into two and fresh blood splattered all over his body. The power of the thunder art was so strong that it almost exterminated all the blood-eyed crows in midair. Little Crane was invigorated, the remaining blood-eyed crows were no longer a threat to it. Right then, Su Zimo pulled out a long saber that shone with a cold glint from his storage bag. With a cold glint in his eyes, he strode forward and smirked at the Foundation establishment cultivators opposite him. The battle has only just begun. With that single step, he covered a distance of 20 feet and arrived before the many Foundation establishment cultivators instantly. Poof! Poof! Su Zimo slashed in reverse and the two of them merely felt their vision blur. Before they could react, 2 gigantic heads were tossed high into the air with blood spewing everywhere. Ah! The remaining Foundation establishment cultivators were so scared that their faces turned pale. Exclaiming, they retreated instinctively. Do you think you can escape? Su Zimo chased after them with his saber. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, he slashed left and right, causing flashes of blood to appear continuously. Leng Ro and Little Fatty were dumbfounded. Against Su Zimo's saber, the early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were like fish on a chopping block, unable to retaliate at all. Even if they summoned flying swords, talismans and even spirit arts, they were all sliced apart by Su Zimo's saber. Even with lesser mastery of the marrow cleansing section, Su Zimo's strength was enough to kill early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. Furthermore, he had even integrated the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra into his body back in Thunderclap Valley. This was a suppression in terms of strength that did not require any technique. Even the spirit arts of early-stage foundation establishment cultivators could not match the power of Su Zimo after he released his bloodline. Chapter 146. Seeing that Su Zimo was on a killing spree and no one could stop him, the gray-robed cultivator could no longer sit still. With a holler, he burst forth with the full might of a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator and summoned a middle-grade flying sword, stabbing towards Su Zimo's back. The two spirit patterns on the sword shone brightly, emitting a mysterious glow with a chilling aura. The sword was extremely fast, and if it was Leng Ro or Little Fatty, they would not have been able to escape unscathed. As for Su Zimo, after killing someone, it was as though he had eyes on the back of his head. Without even turning back, he tapped the ground and dodged the fatal sword. When the gray-robed cultivator saw that, his expression was unchanged and he was not surprised at all. He could already tell that Su Zimo was a body-tempered cultivator and was extremely agile. It was unrealistic for him to want to take down this person in a few moves. Everyone, retreat. Try your best to distance yourself from him. The gray-robed cultivator controlled his flying sword to chase after Su Zimo while shouting, "If you can't, try your best to soar into the air on your flying swords. Don't let him get close to you." Suddenly, Su Zimo laughed and strode forward. Exerting strength in his legs, he burst forth with divine steed fleeting, leaving a series of afterimages behind him. Confusion. Suddenly, Su Zimo reached out and a ball of thunder burst forth from his palm, exploding in front of everyone with a blinding flash and deafening rumbling thunder. Sudden thunder and confusion were both thunder arts of the Void Thunder Manual. Instant thunder was a killing technique with considerable lethality and a huge area of effect. Confusion, on the other hand, was a support-type spirit art with almost no lethality. It made use of the power of thunder to confuse the five senses of the opponent, mainly to block their hearing and vision. The many foundation establishment cultivators on the other side merely felt their vision blur and their ears rumble endlessly. The next moment, Su Zimo had already closed in. In melee combat, no one was a match for Su Zimo. Blood flashed continuously and in the blink of an eye, the few foundation establishment cultivators on the other side were already dead. At this point in the battle, all the early-stage foundation establishment cultivators among the 30-odd foundation establishment cultivators were dead. At this moment, Leng Ro, who was in mid-air, let out a cry of surprise. The amulet on her body shattered with a bang. Then, Leng Ro was hit in the stomach by a palm of spiritual energy. She flew out and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face became even paler. Little Fatty's shoulder was also pierced by a flying sword. He fell to the ground, cold sweat flowing down. It was the gray-robed cultivator who had taken the opportunity to attack. Although he did not take their lives, Little Fatty and Leng Ro were clearly unable to continue fighting. The gray-robed cultivator was very smart. He saw that the power of an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator could no longer suppress Su Zimo, so he took the initiative to deal with Little Fatty and Leng Ro. With that, the gray-robed cultivator could regroup and coordinate with the other 9 mid-stage foundation establishment cultivators to attack Su Zimo in full force. Su Zimo stood in front of Leng Ro and Little Fatty, holding his saber horizontally in front of his chest. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Against the gray-robed cultivator and 10 other foundation establishment cultivators, he did not show any signs of fear. Looking at Su Zimo's back view, Leng Ro felt conflicted. This mission was supposed to be undertaken by her, Little Fatty, Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin. Su Zimo was not qualified to participate. However, if not for Su Zimo, she and Little Fatty would have been dead by now. Little Fatty was filled with emotions as well. Initially, he wanted to let Su Zimo out for a breather. However, he did not expect to encounter something like this. 2 of his senior brothers died tragically and he and Leng Ro were severely injured as well. They could not help at all. Everyone, use your flying swords, talismans and other methods to suppress him. Wait for an opportunity to release your spirit arts and injure that man severely. The gray-robed cultivator was extremely decisive as he instructed the remaining 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators to stand in different directions and spread out. Swash! 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 One after another, flying swords tore through the air with many talismans in between. Narrowing his gaze, Su Zimo gripped his cold moon saber tightly with both hands. With a long howl, he swung his arms left and right to block. Su Zimo was able to fight against any sword, talisman or spirit art used by a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator with his bloodline power without being disadvantaged. However, the gray-robed cultivator was at late-stage Foundation establishment. Su Zimo's marrow cleansing section was only at lesser mastery. Even after fusing with the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, his strength was still inferior. If it was a one-on-one, Su Zimo could make use of his various techniques to close the distance between the two of them before slaying the gray-robed cultivator. But now, with 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators as the gray-robed cultivator's helpers, the 10 of them were able to restrain Su Zimo on the spot. It wasn't that Su Zimo could not break through. However, the moment Su Zimo left, Leng Ro and Little Fatty who were behind him would be killed on the spot. In the face of mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators, Ling Hu was no longer of much use. Clang! 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 The sound of the cold moon saber clashing against the flying swords could be heard continuously as sparks flew everywhere. If they had not witnessed it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that 10 Foundation establishment cultivators were ganging up on a level 9 Chi refinement warrior. Everyone, hold on. That lad must be hiding a secret body tempering technique on him that allowed his physique to be so strong. After we kill him, that secret body tempering technique will be ours. The gray-robed cultivator shouted once more. The remaining 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were invigorated and their blood boiled as they attacked even more viciously. Leng Ro and Little Fatty sat on the spot, only feeling the flashes of swords and sabers before them. The sounds of metal clashing could be heard continuously. However, right from the beginning, they were not injured. Su Zimo had blocked everything for them. During this period of time, Su Zimo had no choice but to exchange a few blows with the gray-robed cultivator. He was on the losing end and his blood was shaken while his teeth ached. Little Fatty could tell that Su Zimo was in a predicament and could not help but shout, "Bro, don't bother about us. Leave first." Leng Ro pursed her red lips and did not say a word. Naturally, she could tell that if not for her and Little Fatty, even the 10 Foundation establishment cultivators might not have been able to stop Su Zimo. Ha ha ha. When the gray-robed cultivator saw that the outcome was set, he could not help but laugh. "Lad, let's see how long more you can last." The current situation was clear, Su Zimo was in a passive position. If he was careless, not only would he not be able to protect Leng Ro and Little Fatty, he would be injured as well. As time passed by, Su Zimo's stamina was gradually depleted and it was only a matter of time before he was defeated and died. In reality, Su Zimo was extremely calm at the moment and had been observing the fight between Little Crane and the blood-eyed crows in the skies the entire time. Due to the might of thunder earlier on, there were not many blood-eyed crows left. The remaining ones were almost all hunted down by Little Crane and could not pose much of a threat. Su Zimo needed Little Crane's help. In such a situation, only Little Crane's strength could be of help. Just as the gray-robed cultivator's laughter ended, Little Crane finished off the last few blood-eyed crows and looked down, meeting Su Zimo's clear eyes. Su Zimo nodded and Little Crane understood. Because he channeled his bloodline with all his might earlier on, Su Zimo's green robes had already burst apart, revealing a thin golden silk armor underneath. Suddenly, Su Zimo tore off the golden silk armor and threw it on the ground. Chapter 147. Everyone had already noticed Su Zimo's golden silk armor but they did not take it to heart. There were no spirit patterns on the golden silk armor, it was merely a pseudo-spirit weapon. Now that the gray-robed cultivator saw Su Zimo rip off the golden silk armor and toss it on the ground, he was stunned for a moment, not understanding the meaning behind that action. The next moment, the gray-robed cultivator's pupils constricted and his expression changed. After ripping off the golden silk armor, Su Zimo seemed to have transformed into a different person. Suddenly, he charged forward and swung his cold moon saber, deflecting the incoming flying swords as he sped towards the gray-robed cultivator. He was too fast. In fact, he was twice as fast as before. A black shadow flashed by like a phantom. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo arrived before the gray-robed cultivator with a torrential killing intent. With a flip of his palm, he slapped the gray-robed cultivator's head. Piak! The gray-robed cultivator's head exploded and he fell backwards stiffly, not understanding what had happened even in death. That golden silk armor was the shattered Khanate spirit weapon, the mystic gold silk armor. Wearing the mystic gold silk armor was equivalent to carrying a heavy object. That was the reason why Su Zimo had not displayed his true strength the entire time. Now that he was free of the burden, Su Zimo was much more relaxed and his speed increased exponentially. Caught off guard, the gray-robed cultivator was killed on the spot. By the time the other 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators wanted to attack again, Little Crane had already seized the opportunity to land on the ground. Carrying Little Fatty, Ling Ro, and Ling Hu, it soared into the air. The coordination between the man and Crane was flawless. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo and the other 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were the only ones left alive on the ground. The 9 of them were pale and looked at Su Zimo, who was closing in step by step with fear in their eyes. Prior to this, the 9 of them had never imagined that more than 30 Foundation establishment cultivators would be killed by a level 9 Chi refinement warrior. Swash! Su Zimo's figure vanished from the spot and a series of afterimages appeared. The saber beam was accompanied by a flash of blood. In the blink of an eye, another 3 people died. 2 of them flew into the air on their swords, wanting to leave. Su Zimo squatted down slightly, and with a boom, 2 deep pits appeared on the ground. Su Zimo leaped into the air and arrived first. While he was still in the air, he slashed down the 2 Foundation establishment cultivators. For left. Su Zimo swatted away 2 flying swords and dashed forward, crashing into a person's chest and instantly exerting his strength. This person's eyeballs protruded out and were bloodshot. His entire chest caved in, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from within his body. When his entire body collapsed to the ground, he was already dead. Su Zimo had long since left. He caught up with another person and his blade flashed again. There were 2 people left. The 2 of them realized that they couldn't escape Su Zimo's pursuit, so they turned around and sped towards the entrance of the spirit mine. Su Zimo was in hot pursuit. Just as the 2 of them were about to escape into the cave, Su Zimo's feet trembled and the ground shook with a boom. The person behind was already scared out of his wits. His legs gave way and he staggered to the ground. The other person had already escaped into the cave and disappeared. No, it's not about me. That wasn't my idea. It was him. The Foundation establishment cultivator lying on the ground was pale and his voice trembled as he tried to explain himself incoherently. Who is he? Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he questioned. I don't know. The person shook his head. However, he looked towards the entrance of the spirit mine instinctively with a hint of wariness in his eyes. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before continuing, everyone in Linfeng City was killed by the people in the cave, right? Yes, the Foundation establishment cultivator nodded hurriedly. What's his cultivation? Just as the Foundation establishment cultivator was about to speak, his expression changed and green spots appeared on his face. Suddenly, he gave Su Zimo a sinister smile. When he saw that smile, Su Zimo's hairs stood on end. Without hesitation, Su Zimo retreated immediately. Bang! There was a dull thud. Just like that, a person who was still alive earlier on exploded right in front of Su Zimo's eyes. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere as a ghastly green ball of light floated into the spirit mine. Right then, Little Crane saw that the battle on the ground was over and descended from the skies with Leng Ro and Little Fatty. Junior brother Su, are you alright? Bro, are you alright? Almost at the same time, Leng Ro and Little Fatty asked. A hint of panic flashed through Leng Ro's eyes before returning to normal. I'm fine. Shaking his head, Su Zimo replied with a frown. No one knew what he was thinking about. After a moment, Su Zimo stroked Little Crane's head and said, "Silly bird, you guys head back to the sect first. It's not good to stay here for long. It would be best if you could bump into cultivators from the sect who are here to provide reinforcements along the way." Caw, caw. Little Crane cried out and urged Su Zimo to hurry up so that they could leave this place together. You guys go ahead first. I'll head back later, Su Zimo shook his head and rejected. Bro, you're not going to barge into the spirit mine again, are you? Little Fatty asked in disbelief with widened eyes. Su Zimo remained silent. Leng Ro and Little Fatty exchanged glances and could see the seriousness in each other's eyes. Junior brother Su, let's head back together. Leng Ro said, the person in the spirit mine might have a huge background and we don't know his strength. Furthermore, his methods are so sinister. There's no need for us to take the risk. We'll just let him have the spirit mine. That's right. Little Fatty added, furthermore, we've already sent a message to the sect and the seniors of the sect will arrive soon. We can't be sure who the spirit mine belongs to. Bro, there's no need for you to take the risk. I've got to head in and take a look. Su Zimo's gaze was resolute as he said in a deep voice, this is a middle-grade spirit mine. That person shouldn't be perfected Jean Dan. If he's still a Foundation establishment cultivator, given my strength, I'll be able to escape unscathed even if I can't defeat him. That person won't be able to hold me back. There were some things that Su Zimo did not explain to Little Fatty and Leng Ro. When he saw the tragedy in Linfeng City, the first thing Su Zimo thought of was the capital of Yen country and his elder brother, Su Hong. Against such power, mortals truly had no way of resisting and could only be slaughtered. That person had descended upon Linfeng City the day before yesterday and none of the living beings in the ancient city were spared. If he were to head to the capital of Yen country one day, his elder brother and the others might suffer the same fate and die an unnatural death. This was their final chance. By the time the seniors of the sect arrived, that person might have already left. Su Zimo was worried that if he were to let that person off today, he would regret it one day. Furthermore, there had to be an explanation for the hundreds of thousands of lives in Linfeng City. Bro, Little Fatty was about to speak when he was interrupted by Su Zimo. You guys are injured. There's no need to follow me in. Leng Ro said, we'll wait for you outside then. 2 hours. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and said, if I'm not out in 2 hours, leave this place immediately. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo said to Little Crane, silly bird, carry everyone further away. If you see any strangers walking out of the cave, leave immediately and don't turn back. Little Crane nodded hurriedly and flapped its wings, its eyes filled with worry. Su Zimo picked up his flying sword from the ground and tossed the mystic gold silk armor into his storage bag. Pretending to be relaxed, he smiled. There are so many storage bags. Hurry and collect them. We'll split them secretly when we return to the sect. As he said that, Su Zimo walked into the spirit mine and disappeared into the depths of the dark cave. Chapter 148. Wielding his saber, Su Zimo traversed through the dark mine, not daring to move too quickly. A long time later, Su Zimo came to a stop as his vision cleared up. The next moment, Su Zimo witnessed a shocking scene. There were more than 10,000 muscular men kneeling on the ground in circles. In the middle of those men was a pile of spirit stones the size of a mountain that emitted extremely rich spirit chi. Those muscular men were dressed plainly and had fearful expressions. They should be mortals who were here to mine for spirit stones. An extremely handsome young man sat on top of that pile of spirit stones. His pitch-black hair fluttered without any wind and his eyes were closed while his arms were slightly spread apart. One after another, a ghastly green air current floated out from the heads of the 10,000 men and converged into the handsome man's body endlessly. The faces of those men were shriveling at a visible speed and their eyes were dull. It was as though their essence blood was being sucked dry instantly. The Foundation establishment cultivator who escaped into the spirit mine earlier on had already turned into a dried corpse at the feet of the handsome man. This was the murderer of the tragedy in Linfeng City. Su Zimo used his spirit-peering art to scan the man. Perfected Foundation establishment. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. His strength could not even match late-stage Foundation establishment, let alone someone at Perfected Foundation establishment. He could not take this man head-on if he wanted to kill him, he could only make use of various techniques to close the distance as much as possible. Although the strength released by a Perfected Foundation establishment was strong, his physique was definitely not as strong as Su Zimo's. This was Su Zimo's only chance. Suddenly, the handsome man opened his long and narrow eyes, his pupils were a sinister ghastly green. "Oh, a chi refinement warrior?" There was a hint of surprise in the handsome man's voice. He then sniffed with an intoxicated expression. "Not bad, not bad. The essence of your flesh is even richer than the 100,000 people in Linfeng City combined. Fiend, hand over your life." Su Zimo sneered and leaped up. Lightning crackled in his palm as he hollered softly, "Thunder Spear." A long spear formed from lightning appeared out of nowhere and pierced towards the handsome man. The handsome man exclaimed softly, "Thunder technique? A mere chi refinement warrior actually knows spirit spells? Oh." As he approached, a look of understanding flashed across the handsome man's eyes. He smiled and said, "I know. The source of the thunder spell's power doesn't come from your dantian, but from your bloodline." With just a glance, the handsome man revealed the secret of Su Zimo's bloodline. Facing the incoming lightning spear, the handsome man smiled and flicked his finger. A green light shot out. The two forces collided, and the two forces continued to corrode each other, emitting an ear-piercing sound. The Thunder Spear was the move with the strongest killing power in the Void Thunder manual. But now, it was broken by the handsome man. Su Zimo's expression didn't change. At this time, he had already arrived below the pile of spirit stones. Then, he jumped up, and rushed up. Whoosh! The handsome man formed a seal with one hand, and the green light in his eyes intensified as he pressed down. A huge green palm descended from the sky, almost blocking Su Zimo's line of sight. Su Zimo didn't dare to fight it head-on and retreated rapidly. The palm suddenly shattered in midair, turning into streaks of green light, as though they were small green snakes that had a life of their own. They coiled around Su Zimo. In terms of spirit spells, this handsome man was many times more brilliant than the previous 30 over Foundation establishment cultivators. Su Zimo didn't dare to fight it head-on. He could only continue to dodge and run around the pile of spirit stones. The many green snakes behind him were hot on his heels. At this moment, Su Zimo was already trying his best, but he still couldn't shake off the many small green snakes that were chasing after him. All of a sudden, Su Zimo turned around and slashed at the green snakes that were chasing after him. Poof! 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 3 green snakes were sliced into 2 on the spot. However, the remaining green snakes swarmed forward and coiled around the cold moon saber. The originally cold and sharp edge of the blade instantly dimmed. Su Zimo suddenly abandoned his saber and used the plow heaven stride, releasing a torrential force. He climbed up the pile of spirit stones in 3 steps and arrived before the handsome man. Even without the cold moon saber, Su Zimo's close combat strength was still terrifying. There were too many killing moves in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Any one of them was enough to kill the handsome man in front of him. Boom! Su Zimo flipped his palm and slammed it down, as though he wanted to tear the vast land apart. A bone staff suddenly appeared in the handsome man's palm. It was crystal clear and made of white bones. There was a skull at the top that emitted an evil aura. The handsome man chanted a few strange syllables and suddenly reached out with the bone staff, pressing it against Su Zimo's palm. Bang! The power of the earth-rupturing palm was released. The handsome man's body trembled and his palm cracked. He almost lost his grip on the bone staff. Right then, the skull at the top of the bone staff suddenly opened its mouth as though it was alive. Two beams of light shot out from the holes of its eyes and it bit Su Zimo's wrist. Su Zimo's expression changed. The pain from his wrist was still bearable. However, Su Zimo could clearly feel that the bloodline in his body was being drained by an external force. If this carried on, Su Zimo would probably die from the depletion of his bloodline like those who died around him. Rumble. Boom. Su Zimo let out a long howl and channeled the power of his bloodline with all his might. A rumbling sound of a tsunami was released from his body in a terrifying manner. The power of his bloodline surged and burst forth, almost causing the bone staff to explode. The handsome man narrowed his eyes and channeled his spirit energy with all his might as well. A ball of cold light shot out from the bone staff. The skull at the top of the bone staff was still biting Su Zimo's wrist tightly, swallowing mouthfuls of fresh blood. The originally pure white skull was now faintly turning blood red. The handsome man's eyes danced with excitement as he burst into laughter. What a pure power of bloodline! I really want to know how a chi refinement warrior like you managed to cultivate such a strong bloodline. The melee combat between the two of them seemed slow, but in reality, it happened in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo lost the initiative and did not have time to think. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed at the handsome man's head. Although there was no longer any demonic chi in his bloodline, Su Zimo's palm was no different from the claws of a spirit demon. Even rocks would be reduced to dust with that single swipe. The handsome man had complete control of the situation. Unhurriedly, he conjured hand seals and hollered softly, "Blood curse." A green ball of light appeared in front of the handsome man's chest. It spun continuously and grew in size, blocking the two of them. Su Zimo's right hand fell into the ball of light. It was as though it was stuck in a swamp and could not move an inch. It was completely restricted. Su Zimo's expression finally changed. At that moment, Su Zimo could clearly sense waves of weakness coming from his body. If this continued, his blood essence would be completely devoured in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Chapter 149. If your bloodline was any stronger, I wouldn't have been able to restrain you today. What a pity. The handsome man smirked sinisterly. Su Zimo realized that as well. If he had attained greater mastery of the marrow cleansing section, he could kill late-stage foundation establishment cultivators with ease. Coupled with the thunder marrow cleansing section, his strength would definitely be comparable to a perfected foundation establishment cultivator. Even the bone staff of the handsome man might not be able to bite through his flesh. However, at that moment, a sense of helplessness rose in Su Zimo's heart. His left wrist was bitten tightly by the skeleton on the bone staff and half of Su Zimo's body was numb and he was almost powerless. On the other side, Su Zimo's right hand was enveloped by a dark green ball of light and was motionless. Even though the handsome man's face was right behind the ball of light, Su Zimo did not have the strength to pierce through it. Furthermore, Su Zimo's right hand was corroded by that strange power and his flesh was starting to rot and fall off. It was a terrifying sight. Behind the ball of light was the smug smile of the handsome man. Right then, The handsome man's smile froze and his gaze froze, as though he had seen something strange. Su Zimo's gaze landed on the ball of light between the two of them as well. Within the dark green ball of light, the flesh on Su Zimo's right hand had already fallen off completely, revealing a scarlet bone palm. The bones were crystal clear and burned with fine flames on the surface. It was like the most beautiful treasure in the world. The fingertips of the bone palm were as sharp as knives. It did not seem like the palm of a human. An extremely terrifying aura spread out and the dark green ball of light shattered. In the face of that aura, the handsome man felt as insignificant as an ant and his heart stopped beating instantly. What is this? The handsome man's pupils constricted violently. At the same time, Su Zimo felt a new power surge into his body from his right hand. His blood seemed to be boiling and spewing flames. Kill! Su Zimo hollered and reached out with his blood-red bone palm, grabbing towards the handsome man's head. The handsome man's expression changed and he hurriedly moved his white bone staff in front of him, wanting to block the blood-red bone palm. Piak! Su Zimo only made a light grab. The bone staff of the handsome man was directly broken. Puff! In the next moment, Su Zimo's bone palm descended and crushed the handsome man's head. The great circle of foundation establishment had perished. Su Zimo stood rooted to the ground, looking at his right hand in disbelief. The handsome man's bone staff was no less hard than a middle-grade spirit artifact. But just now, it had been easily broken by his right hand. Was this his right hand? Su Zimo could clearly feel that this blood-colored bone palm was not his original palm. This blood-colored bone palm exuded a terrifying aura, as if it could destroy everything in the world. Su Zimo suddenly recalled something. Back in the Tsanglang mountain range, he had fought with many cultivators from the Joyful clan. His right hand was almost crippled and turned into a mush. After that, when Su Zimo woke up, his whole body was intact, without a single wound. This blood bone palm must have been attached to his wrist by Dai Yu at that time. However, what was the background of this blood bone palm? Why did it cause Su Zimo's heart to palpitate? At that moment, there was a clue to many of his previous doubts. The reason why he could cultivate a level 3 spirit fire right away was because of this blood bone palm before him. The reason why Su Zimo's right hand did not change the entire time when he was demonized was because his strength was not enough to activate the blood bone palm. Even though he did not know the secrets of the blood bone palm, Su Zimo knew that many of the abnormalities in his body were related to it. This must be one of the 3 items that Dai Yu left for him. Su Zimo looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he did not discover anyone else. The blood bone palm was clearly not a human's palm. If it was exposed, Su Zimo would not be able to explain himself. Su Zimo put away the handsome man's storage bag and rummaged through it. He took out a grade 2 elixir, the muscle-growing elixir, and swallowed it. The muscle-increasing elixir combined with Su Zimo's strong self-healing abilities allowed a thin layer of flesh to grow on Su Zimo's right hand. Although it had not fully recovered, it had already covered the blood-colored bone palm. Still worried, Su Zimo took out another piece of cloth and wrapped it around his right hand. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo waved his hand and kept all the middle-grade spirit stones in his storage bag. He was here for the spirit stones and naturally would not be soft-hearted. Looking at the tens of thousands of mortals who were still kneeling and had already died, Su Zimo sighed internally. His eyes were filled with pity and emotions. If not for Dai Yu, Su Zimo would be no different from these mortals and could only be slaughtered by cultivators. Why? Why did these mortals not have spirit roots? Senior Crane once said that whether one had a spirit root or not was a person's fate and no one could change it. Without a spirit root, it meant that one could not cultivate. Could these people's endings be their fate as well? Su Zimo felt indignant. He felt indignant for the hundreds of thousands of innocent people who died in Linfeng City and for the tens of thousands of simple men before him. If these people could cultivate, they might not have died today. He had Dai Yu to change his fate and plant a spirit root for him. However, who could change their fates for these people before him? Ugh! Su Zimo sighed once more and left the place. Outside, Little Crane and the others hid far away, watching the spirit mine without daring to let down their guard. After 2 hours, a person walked out of the cave. Leng Ro and the others focused their gazes. It was Su Zimo. Little Crane carried Leng Ro, Little Fatty, and Linghu over hurriedly as Little Fatty cheered in the skies. How was it, bro? Are you alright? Little Fatty was the first to jump down and asked in concern. Su Zimo shook his head. Leng Ro's gaze landed on Su Zimo's right hand as she asked softly, your hand? It's fine, just a small injury. Su Zimo naturally would not tell the truth. Right then, a streak of light sped over from the distance at an extremely fast speed and arrived before them in the blink of an eye. It was a gigantic spirit vessel. The side of the spirit vessel was etched with the image of a mountain peak. On the deck of the spirit vessel stood a group of perfected Jin Dan. The 5 people in the lead were the 5 peak masters of Misty Peak. The 5 peak masters leaped down from the spirit vessel and swept their gazes. When they saw more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivator corpses strewn across the battlefield, they could not conceal the shock in their eyes. Su Zimo and the other 2 had not expected that Leng Ro's message would alert the perfected Jin Dan of the sect as well. Greetings to the 5 first seats, greetings to the elders. Su Zimo and the other 2 bowed. The 5 peak masters nodded and asked with grim expressions. Little Fatty described everything from the beginning to the end, including how they discovered the abnormality in Linfeng City and how Su Zimo barged into the spirit mine alone. At the end, the disheveled old man glared at Su Zimo with a reproachful look. Alright, let's return to the sect first. Right then, Wen Xian came out of the spirit mine and waved his hand, bringing Su Zimo and the other 2 onto the spirit vessel. Chapter 150. Ethereal Main Peak, Ethereal Palace. The 5 peak masters brought Su Zimo, Leng Ro, and Little Fatty here and recounted the incident of the spirit mine in Linfeng City to the Patriarch in detail without leaving out anything. Su Zimo and the other 2 left. Patriarch Lingyun closed his eyes in deep thought and asked after a while, what do you guys think? When Xian replied, such cruel methods should be the work of someone from the fiend sections. Patriarch, you mustn't be careless. The other 4 peak masters nodded as well. Pass down my orders. Before the sect competition, all sect disciples should avoid heading out as much as possible. If they head out, they must be accompanied by at least 20 perfected Foundation Establishment disciples. Ling Yun continued, make arrangements for the funerals of Lu Yangrong and Guan Jin. Also, reward Leng Ro and Little Fatty with spirit stones and elixirs. As for Su Zimo, the disheveled old man said hurriedly, Patriarch, if not for this lad, even Little Crane wouldn't have been able to return, let alone Leng Ro and Little Fatty. We've all gone over to take a look. The battlefield was extremely tragic and more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivators died under this lad's saber. Impart the Ethereal Foundation Establishment to him, Ling Yun said. When he heard that, the disheveled old man's eyes lit up in joy as he bowed hurriedly. That would be for the best. I'll thank Patriarch on behalf of Su Zimo. The Ethereal Foundation Establishment was one of the 3 secret skills of the sect. In the Qi condensation realm, the requirements for cultivation techniques were very low. Any cultivation technique would allow one to cultivate a sea of Qi, and as long as their spirit roots were good enough, they would be able to enter the Foundation Establishment realm. However, in the Foundation Establishment realm, there were requirements for cultivation techniques. Foundation Establishment was divided into 4 levels, early stage, mid stage, late stage and perfected. At perfected Foundation Establishment, there was a meridian opening. The so-called meridian opening referred to the use of spirit energy to open up the 8 extraordinary meridians. Every time a meridian was opened, a cultivator's strength would increase. Although a foundation establishment cultivator with 8 open meridians and a foundation establishment cultivator with 1 open meridian were both considered to be at the peak of the foundation establishment realm, there was a world of difference in their strength. Normally, if one could open up 4 of the 8 meridians, there would be a great chance of forming the Jin Dan. If he could open up 5 meridians, his chances of forming his gold core would be even higher. If he could open all 8 extraordinary meridians, he would definitely become a Jin Dan. This seems simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. Many foundation establishment cultivators might not even be able to unlock 4 meridians in their entire lives and could only form their cores by force. Most of them would fail in their attempt to form their cores and die in depression. If he could cultivate a superior foundation establishment cultivation method, his chances of opening his meridians would be much higher. Ethereal foundation establishment was a superior foundation establishment cultivation technique. Cultivators who cultivated this secret skill would be able to unlock at least 4 meridians at the perfected foundation establishment stage. Of course, in the entire Great Zhou dynasty, there had only been 1 foundation establishment cultivator who had unlocked all 8 meridians in the past 1,000 years. The most recent foundation establishment cultivator to do so was that monster incarnate who walked out of Misty Peak 1,000 years ago. It was almost impossible for all 8 meridians to be unlocked. There was no foundation establishment cultivator who purposely pursued unlocking all 8 meridians. Normally, one could attempt to break through to the Jin Dan realm as long as 4 meridians were unlocked. Of course, it was undeniable that the more meridians were unlocked, the stronger one would be and the quality of the Jin Dan formed would be different as well. Therefore, in the inner sect, there were some middle-aged foundation establishment cultivators who were in their 40s but were stuck at perfected foundation establishment. All of them wanted to unlock as many meridians as possible and were not in a hurry to form their cores. However, the lifespan of a foundation establishment cultivator was only slightly more than 100 years. After 50 years of age, one's essence, chi, and spirit would deteriorate. If one could not unlock their meridians in the past, it would be even more difficult in the future. Therefore, most people who were stuck at perfected foundation establishment until they were 50 years old at most would attempt to form their Jin Dan regardless of how many meridians they unlocked. The amazing thing about ethereal foundation establishment was that it could ensure that a cultivator could unlock at least 4 meridians. That meant that they were already halfway through the threshold of forming their cores. Furthermore, with that foundation, cultivators who were extremely talented would be able to unlock even more meridians. After all, there was once a cultivator who unlocked all 8 meridians in Misty Peak who was invincible among foundation establishment cultivators in the Tianhuang North region. In the ethereal palace, just as the 5 peak masters were about to leave, Patriarch Lingyun added, "Right, don't spread this news." The 5 peak masters were stunned for a moment before nodding in agreement. After the 5 of them left, a beautiful red-haired woman suddenly appeared in the palace. Lingyun stood up and cupped his fists, asking in a deep voice, "Senior, have you heard of a similar demonic technique that can absorb a cultivator's essence blood?" The red-haired woman shook her head with a grim expression. Lingyun frowned and murmured, "Could it be someone from the 7 fiend sects? If it's someone from the 7 sects, Misty Peak won't be easy to deal with. If we don't deal with it properly, we might be wiped out. It's not someone from the fiend sections." The red-haired woman shook her head and said with certainty. Ling Yun's expression relaxed slightly. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, the red-haired woman continued, "However, that person's background is probably not weaker than the 7 fiend sections. In fact, it might even be stronger." Could it be? As though he had thought of something, Ling Yun's pupils constricted and he did not continue. The red-haired woman nodded and said, "That pair of green eyes should be from the forbidden grounds of Tianhuang mainland." Pust! Ling Yun gasped and was shocked. After a long time, he asked, "How did a being from the forbidden grounds escape?" "I don't know either." The red-haired woman sighed. "Chaos is brewing in Tianhuang mainland. Senior, your lifespan." Ling Yun could not help but ask worriedly. "I won't be able to last long." 100 years at most. The red-haired woman said, over the years, True Fire Sect, Iridescent Clouds Palace, Southern Mountains Sect and Azure Frost Sect have all coveted Misty Peak. Even some of the smaller sects are tempted. When I die, Misty Peak is on the brink of death. If no one in the sect enters the Void Reversion realm and becomes a Void Reversion in the next 100 years, the lineage of Misty Peak is probably going to end. Senior. Suddenly, Ling Yun knelt on the ground and looked at the red-haired woman in silence with a guilty expression. The crane was the spirit beast of the founder master of Misty Peak and had protected the sect for thousands of years. It was equivalent to a void reversion and was the only void reversion in the sect. All these years, if not for the protection of Senior Crane, Misty Peak would have been destroyed multiple times. There's no need for that. There are thousands of Jining Jinjuan and no one can enter the void reversion realm without a powerful spirit refinement technique. You don't have to blame yourself either. The red-haired woman reached out to help him up and said softly, don't worry, I'll protect Misty Peak until the end. At least, I won't let him down for what he entrusted me back then. Ling Yun sighed. Actually, the batch of disciples last year had decent potential. For example, Feng Haoyu, Leng Ro, Su Zimo and Little Fatty had limitless futures. It's a pity, Ling Yun did not continue. It was a pity that those people would not be able to enter the void reversion realm within 100 years and help the sect tide through this calamity. Chapter 151. Because the 5 Peak Masters had given a gag order to Su Zimo and the other 2, no one in the sect knew of the details of the battle in Linfeng City. Everyone only vaguely heard that Leng Ro and the others were ambushed when they were out and 2 inner sect disciples died tragically. It was only later that perfected being Jean Dan arrived and rescued Leng Ro and the other 2. Immediately after, the sect passed down a series of orders for the sect disciples to avoid going out as much as possible. As such, the sect became tense. Although most people did not know the reason, they felt a sense of danger and chose to cultivate in seclusion. It was the same for Su Zimo. Previously, Su Zimo had just left Thunderclap Valley and was lacking spirit stones. That was why he followed Leng Ro, Little Fatty, and the others out. Now that Su Zimo had sufficient spirit stones, he had already started cultivating maniacally, wanting to catch up with the cultivation realm that he had lost half a year ago. In the cave abode, Su Zimo resumed his normal cultivation routine. During the day, he would absorb spirit stones and refine elixirs. After that, he would consume perfect-grade elixirs to raise his cultivation realm. At night, he would channel the tiger leopard thunderous roar and continue refining his marrow to produce fresh and powerful blood. The effect of the marrow cleansing was obvious. Even his skin, flesh, tendons and bones would be strengthened during the process. Every night when he woke up, a thin layer of black dirt would appear on the surface of Su Zimo's body. Those were the impurities in his body. Cultivating both immortality and demonic at the same time, both realms were improving steadily. With sufficient spirit stones and a non-stop cultivation, Su Zimo reached perfected chi condensation after a month. When he was at level 9 chi condensation, Su Zimo had already formed a chi si in his dantian. Now that he was at perfected chi condensation, the chi si changed once more, as though it was dyed with a red glow. Flames burned on it, beautiful and exuding a powerful aura. Although he did not spar with anyone, Su Zimo dared to guarantee that he could crush all chi refinement warriors of the same level at chi condensation. Su Zimo had just breathed a sigh of relief when the sound of fluttering clothes came from outside the cave. Soon, someone knocked on the door. Su Zimo frowned. The sound of these footsteps sounded very unfamiliar. Usually, there were not many people who came to his cave residence to look for him. Most of them were Little Fatty, but this footstep was very light. It was obviously not Little Fatty. Su Zimo waved his sleeve and the door of the cave opened. A fragrant wind blew over, and a woman in snow-white clothes stood at the door. Her expression was cold, but there was a trace of nervousness in the depths of her eyes as she looked inside nervously. This woman was Leng Ro. Su Zimo was surprised and quickly got up to greet her. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I didn't expect it to be senior sister Leng. Come in quickly." "Yes." Leng Ro replied softly and walked in with her head lowered. Given Leng Ro's character, she might not be willing to meet anyone even if they were to visit her. Now that she had taken the initiative to look for a male disciple, if others were to know about this, their jaws would drop. "Is there anything you need, senior sister Leng?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. Leng Ro thought for a moment and said, "I haven't thanked you for saving me outside Linfeng City a few days ago. I'm here to thank you officially." "So, that's the matter." Su Zimo smiled and waved it off. "It's nothing. I helped to save myself as well. Don't take it to heart." Leng Ro nodded and did not say anything else. She was not good at conversation to begin with and Su Zimo could not keep asking. The atmosphere suddenly turned cold and awkward. Leng Ro hesitated for a moment and said, "Junior brother Su, I've made 2 grade 2 talismans. I'll give them to you as thanks for saving my life." With that, Leng Ro took out 2 talismans from her storage bag and handed them over. However, she lowered her head and did not look at Su Zimo. Su Zimo thought to himself, "If I refuse, it'll be even more awkward." With that thought, Su Zimo reached out to receive the 2 talismans and said with a smile, "Thank you, senior sister Leng." When Leng Ro saw Su Zimo accept the talismans, her expression relaxed and her tense body gradually relaxed. She raised her head and glanced at Su Zimo before quickly turning to the side. Of the 2 talismans, one was a protection talisman while the other was an attack talisman. Sensing the auras of the 2 talismans, Su Zimo nodded to himself. The 2 talismans should be the strongest grade 2 talismans. It was clear that Leng Ro had spent a lot of effort on them. Su Zimo lamented internally, "It's a pity that I can't refine middle grade spirit weapons right now. Otherwise, I'll refine one as a return gift." Right now, Su Zimo could advance to Foundation Establishment Realm at any moment. His 6 inferior grade flying swords could no longer keep up with his cultivation. If he wanted to release a sword formation, he would have to refine his own flying swords. But right now, Su Zimo's tempering technique was way too crude. Even with superior materials, the impurities could not be removed and he could not condense a second spirit pattern. This was a huge problem that had to be resolved. The 2 of them chatted casually for a while more before Leng Ro left. Su Zimo took out an elixir from his storage bag. There were 5 patterns carved on it, looking mysterious and profound. A perfect foundation establishment elixir. This foundation establishment elixir was refined after Su Zimo defeated Feng Haoyu during the Elixir Peak face-off. At the thought of Feng Haoyu, Su Zimo could not help but recall how Feng Haoyu stopped him after the Elixir Peak face-off and said some threatening words to him. At that time, it seemed as though Feng Haoyu was merely venting his emotions. However, Su Zimo thought about it later on and realized that this was not as simple as it seemed. Now that he was at Foundation Establishment Realm, Su Zimo would inevitably have to face Feng Haoyu once more. He did not know what the latter would do. After all, Feng Haoyu was probably going to be even harder to deal with now that he had experienced a crushing defeat. With that thought in mind, Su Zimo swallowed the Foundation Establishment elixir in a single mouthful. The elixir melted in his mouth and a warm current flowed down his throat, eventually gathering at his dantian and emitting a powerful medicinal effect. Under the influence of the medicinal power, Su Zimo calmed himself down and condensed the sea of qi in his dantian slowly. He was neither flustered nor anxious. As the name suggested, foundation establishment was about laying down one's foundation. If one's foundation was not solid, there was a chance that their future path would be problematic. The scarlet qi sea shrunk continuously. However, the aura it emitted was increasingly terrifying. Just like that, time passed by bit. Su Zimo was in no hurry. For ordinary cultivators, the fastest ones would take less than 2 hours and the slowest 3 to 5 days to establish their foundation. There was almost no one who was as slow as Su Zimo. After a full 100 days, Su Zimo opened his eyes and a glint flashed through them. The qi si in his dantian had finally disappeared, turning into a scarlet spirit liquid. Spirit qi underwent a qualitative change and transformed into spirit energy. 100 days of foundation establishment. Although those 100 days seemed ordinary, it helped Su Zimo establish an incomparably stable Dao foundation. This day, Su Zimo walked out of his cave abode and summoned his flying sword, heading straight for the main peak of Ethereal Peak. Now that he was at Foundation Establishment Realm, he could head to Ethereal Peak to take part in the Inner Sect test. As long as he passed, he would become an Inner Sect disciple of the sect. Chapter 152. The Inner Sect assessment of the sect was relatively easy. It merely tested the disciples' control and understanding of sword kinesis and whether their foundation was stable. When the auditing elder saw that it was Su Zimo, he did not even test him and gave him an Inner Sect disciple identity badge. Under Little Fatty's lead, the two of them circled around Ethereal Main Peak before finding a cave abode to settle down. Half a day passed in such a short time. The news of Su Zimo becoming an Inner Sect disciple spread through the Inner Sect before long. Su Zimo was about to return to his cave abode and continue his seclusion to cultivate Ethereal Foundation establishment when a group of people walked over from not far away. They had unfriendly expressions and smirked coldly. The leader was the former disciple of Spirit Peak, Sun Tao, who was knocked out by Su Zimo with a single palm strike. After half a year, Sun Tao was already at early-stage foundation establishment. The rest of them were unfamiliar and had different cultivation realms. There were even late-stage foundation establishment cultivators. Before long, they surrounded Su Zimo and Little Fatty. Little Fatty smiled and cupped his fists. "Senior brothers, what can I do for you?" "Little Fatty, go away. This has nothing to do with you." Harumphing coldly, Sun Tao looked at Su Zimo with a dark gaze and raised his brow. "Su Zimo, back then on Spirit Peak, you ambushed me when I was unprepared. That debt has yet to be settled. I won't take advantage of you either. Since we're both at early-stage foundation establishment, let's fight it out in the spirit arena." In reality, even though both of them were at early-stage foundation establishment, one of them had just entered while the other was already at the peak of early-stage foundation establishment. Furthermore, Su Zimo had just become an Inner Sect disciple and had yet to learn spirit arts. On the other hand, Sun Tao had been in the Inner Sect for a few months and had already mastered many spirit arts. Everyone knew whether it was fair or not, but no one pointed it out. Little Fatty had a strange expression and looked at Sun Tao with a hint of pity. However, he did not point it out either. Su Zimo could not be bothered with Sun Tao and merely shook his head. "I'm not interested." "Humph." Sun Tao's face darkened as he shouted, "Su Zimo, it's not up to you today." Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and stared at Sun Tao for a while. Suddenly, he smiled and asked, "What do you mean?" "Su Zimo, stop pretending." A sect disciple at the side shouted, "If not for the fact that you, a Qi refinement warrior, had implicated Senior Brother Lu and Senior Brother Guan in the spirit mine of Linfeng City, how would they have perished?" "What nonsense are you talking about?" Little Fatty couldn't help but scold them. He knew exactly what had happened at the spirit mine in Linfeng City, but no one else knew about it. One of them sneered and said, "Although the three of you kept your mouths shut about that matter, we can roughly guess what happened. It must be this Su Zimo who dragged the two senior brothers down." Su Zi was expressionless as he listened to the criticism of his fellow disciples. This rumor had no basis and was merely the result of a wild guess. Although it sounded ridiculous, many people in the Inner Sect believed it. There was no way Su Zimo would have believed that rumor if someone had not spread it intentionally. Sun Tao sneered. "Su Zimo, even if you reject my challenge, from today onwards, many senior brothers will challenge you continuously to seek justice for the two dead senior brothers." don't even think about cultivating in the inner sect from now on." Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he nodded. "Alright, let's go to the spirit arena." For some reason, Sun Tao felt uneasy when he heard Su Zimo's nonchalant tone. After all, Su Zimo had defeated Feng Haoyu back when he was at the Qi Condensation Realm. Now that he was at the Foundation Establishment Realm, Su Zimo would definitely be even stronger. However, on second thought, Sun Tao realized that Su Zimo had just joined the inner sect and had yet to learn spirit arts. How could he compare to Sun Tao? Before long, just as Sun Tao's thoughts were running wild, everyone had already arrived at the spirit arena of Ethereal Peak. Su Zimo walked up slowly, calm and composed. Sun Tao summoned his flying sword and leaped onto the spirit arena. Conjuring hand seals with his left hand, spirit energy rippled from his fingertips, his spirit art was already formed. "Ha, today's the day I avenge my humiliation." Sun Tao's heart was set after conjuring his spirit art and he could not help but laugh gleefully. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he said indifferently, "Sun Tao, if I can knock you out once, I can do it a second time." Boom! The moment he said that, Su Zimo's figure vanished from the spot. A series of afterimages appeared between the two of them. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already arrived before Sun Tao. He did not make use of spirit weapons or spirit energy, it was purely the burst of his physical strength. A tragic, malevolent aura surged over. Instantly, Sun Tao felt as though he was not facing a human, but an ancient ferocious beast. Without time to think, Sun Tao threw out the spirit art he conjured with his left hand and controlled his flying sword with his right, stabbing forward. The distance was too close and there was almost no need for aiming. Rumble. Right at this time, Sun Tao's ears actually heard a burst of shocking sound of waves, surging and surging. Su Zimo's eyes lit up as the power of his bloodline burst forth. Su Zimo punched casually and destroyed Sun Tao's spirit art. Immediately after, he tilted his body slightly and dodged the incoming sword. With a flip of his hand, he slammed it towards Sun Tao's face. This action was exactly the same as what he had done on Spirit Peak. Sun Tao was greatly alarmed. He only felt his vision darken as a shocking force descended. His entire body fell backward uncontrollably. Bang! The back of his head hit the ground and blood flashed as Sun Tao fainted on the spot. It was too fast. Many of the inner sect disciples watching below were not prepared. Both parties merely made contact and Sun Tao had already fainted on the spirit arena. Everyone was stunned on the spot and could not recover for a moment. Right then, Su Zimo turned around and looked at the inner sect disciples below. He said slowly, "Anyone else who's indignant can come up together and I'll take them all." Everyone was in an uproar. The next moment, the inner sect disciples below were enraged and hollered, "Brazen! Brazen!" What did Su Zimo mean by that? He was treating everyone as though they were nothing. A disciple who had just joined the inner sect dared to be so brazen. The inner sect disciples present were all young and impetuous, who could tolerate that? Little Fatty furrowed his brows in confusion. In reality, after Sun Tao said that, Su Zimo realized that this was the move of the enemy hiding in the dark. He had to take it whether he wanted to or not. As Sun Tao had said, if he did not settle today's matter, he could forget about cultivating properly in the inner sect. And the simplest and most effective way to solve this problem was to intimidate them. Not only did he have to intimidate Sun Tao and the others, he had to intimidate the person hiding in the dark as well. Therefore, not only did Su Zimo have to defeat Sun Tao and the others today, he had to reveal his true strength and crush everything. Chapter 153. Although many disciples were infuriated, they maintained their rationality and did not rush forward. A mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator was the first to enter the spirit arena and said coldly, "Junior brother Su, aren't you being too arrogant?" Before that person could finish, Su Zimo took 2 steps forward and arrived before him. Without a second word, he raised his arm and drew an arc in the air. His fist was filled with flesh and blood as it crashed down like a gigantic seal. Ah! That person exclaimed and crushed a protection talisman hurriedly. Su Zimo's fist smashed heavily against the barrier of the protection talisman, causing it to shake violently. Immediately after, a series of chilling sounds could be heard. Crack! 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 Cracks appeared on the barrier and spread rapidly. A Grade 2 protection talisman was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. Scared out of his wits, that person jumped off the spirit arena before Su Zimo could continue punching. His eyes were filled with shock as he retreated hurriedly like a stray dog. Another inner sect disciple grit his teeth and leaped onto the spirit arena, summoning his flying sword right away. 2 spirit lights shone on the flying sword in a bedazzling manner. It was a middle-grade flying sword. On the other side, that person conjured a hand seal and pointed at Su Zimo's feet. One after another, thick vines grew out of Su Zimo's feet. Like venomous snakes, they crawled up his ankles and coiled around him tightly. The flying sword and spirit art descended at the same time in a seamless manner. If it was anyone else, they would not be able to dodge the attack of the flying sword with their bodies restricted. However, Su Zimo's bloodline was way too strong. Unless it was a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator, even a spirit art released by a mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator would not be able to trap him. Rumble. Boom. Su Zimo's bloodline rumbled as lightning flashed. When the power of thunder struck the vines conjured by the spirit art, they were electrocuted into nothingness. Swash! At the same time, the flying sword descended and pierced his glabella. Su Zimo chuckled and did not dodge. Reaching out, his palm was as soft as a tongue as it rested gently on the incoming sword, coiling and shaking it. The flying sword obediently fell into Su Zimo's palm. However, Su Zimo's palm was completely unscathed. The inner disciple's jaw dropped, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. This kind of method had already exceeded his understanding. Snatching a white blade with bare hands was just a small trick used by martial artists in the pugilistic world. It could only be used against mortals. How could they have ever seen someone capable of snatching a Foundation Establishment cultivator's flying sword with their bare hands? Everyone, attack together! Someone in the crowd shouted. The dozen or so disciples below felt their blood boil as they jumped onto the spirit arena. Good, that's how it should be. Su Zimo laughed loudly and took a few steps forward. He directly crashed into the crowd and unleashed the power of his bloodline. With the ferocity of his unparalleled fist, he crushed his way through. Bang 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 bang. Accompanied by cries of pain, the sound of fists colliding could be heard as figures fell one after another. Many people had just entered the spirit arena and were sent down by Su Zimo before they could even stabilize themselves. In the blink of an eye, the spirit arena was littered with people. All defeated. 3 cultivators stood in the distance. Although they were also inner sect disciples based on their identity badges, they had extraordinary auras and were clearly different from others. That's Su Zimo, the number 1 of the 4 peaks last year. He's not weak in melee combat. However, he's not very useful. Yes, he won't even have a chance to get close to us, the person in the middle smiled. I heard that there were a few disciples with decent potential last year. Apart from Su Zimo, there's also Feng Haoyu and a beauty called Leng Ro. Yes, all 3 of them have a chance to become legacy disciples and reach our status. That's a story for later. Let's continue our seclusion and prepare for the sect competition. When Feng Haoyu saw that, he turned and walked towards his cave abode expressionlessly. The moment he entered and closed the door, he paused in his tracks, as though he sensed something. That lad's methods are terrifying. In the spirit mine of Linfeng City, more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivators died in his hands. There was even a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator among them. Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded from a black figure in a corner of the cave abode. Feng Haoyu was secretly shocked. The disciples of the sect did not know what happened outside Linfeng City at all. Only the 5 peak masters and some elders who went to provide reinforcements knew. Feng Haoyu said, "According to what you said, Senior, I can't deal with him given my current methods. Furthermore, I can't kill Su Zimo in the sect." "Have you learned all 3 secret skills?" The hoarse voice sounded once more. "Yes." Feng Haoyu nodded. A large part of his mission this time round was for the 3 secret skills of Misty Peak. "Record them down for me." "No," Feng Haoyu shook his head. The moment the black figure's tone changed, the atmosphere in the cave abode turned tense with a murderous aura. "Before learning the secret skills, Ling Yun made me swear an oath that I'm not allowed to spread them," Feng Haoyu explained. "I have no choice either." The cave abode fell silent. After a moment, the black figure laughed sinisterly. You're not allowed to spread them. Let's see how long Misty Peak can last. At that time, I'll come personally to snatch away the 3 secret skills." "What about Su Zimo and the 3 legacy disciples of Misty Peak?" Feng Haoyu asked again. "Su Zimo is still alright. However, the 3 legacy disciples live in seclusion and rarely show themselves. There's no chance for us to make a move." The black figure pondered. "Don't act rashly lest we alert them." Before the sect competition, he would find a chance to capture all 4 of them in one fell swoop. Let's see how Misty Peak is going to participate in the sect competition this time round." A cold gust of wind blew and the black figure vanished from the spot, leaving Feng Haoyu's cave abode. As Su Zimo had expected, no one in the inner sect came looking for trouble with him after that battle. For the next 2 months, Su Zimo stayed in seclusion in his cave abode, absorbing spirit stones continuously to cultivate ethereal foundation establishment and raise his cultivation realm. 2 months later, it was near the end of the year. Su Zimo had already cultivated to the peak of early-stage foundation establishment and wanted to head out for a walk after a long period of silence. His main goal was to find a secret manual on weapon refinement. Without it, Su Zimo would not be able to raise his weapon refinement skills. No matter how high his cultivation realm was, his strength would be reduced if he could not release sword formations. Su Zimo left silently without making a sound. The destination of his trip was Chiyu City, an important city in the Great Zhou dynasty where the Sky Treasure Auction House was located. Typically, any city where cultivators gathered would have a Sky Treasure Auction House. However, there were not many Sky Treasure Auction Houses in the Great Zhou dynasty and Chiyu City was the closest one to Misty Peak. Su Zimo intended to try his luck at the Sky Treasure Auction House. Ever since the battle outside Linfeng City, he still had quite a number of spirit stones left in his storage bag and could use them. Chapter 154. Chiyu City. From afar, it was as though a gigantic beast was sprawled on the ground, menacing and terrifying. Even the capital of Yan country paled in comparison. Furthermore, this was merely one of the major cities of the dynasty. One could only imagine how majestic and domineering the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty was. Along the way, the closer they got to Chiyu City, the more cultivators they saw. In the capital of Yan country, there were at most some chi refinement warriors and it was rare to even see a foundation establishment cultivator. However, foundation establishment cultivators were way too common in Chiyu City. Traveling on swords, people came and went in an endless stream. In fact, there were even occasional flashes of perfected Jean Dan who was flying without anything beneath his feet. In comparison, Chiyu City was more like a city of cultivators. Although Su Zimo was a disciple of Misty Peak, he did not dare to be arrogant in Chiyu City. In fact, he had already put away his sect badge and found a random inn to stay in. Similar to Sky Treasure Pavilion, the Sky Treasure Auction House was backed by the royal family of the Great Zhou dynasty. Listening to the discussions of the cultivators around him, Su Zimo was even more confident about this trip. It was said that Sky Treasure Auction House was the largest trading market in the Great Zhou dynasty and was famous. Many rare treasures had been auctioned here in the past, be it spirit weapons, elixirs, talismans or secret manuals, everything was available. Of course, the cost of getting what one wanted in Sky Treasure Auction House was extremely high as well. By the time Su Zimo entered the city, it was already evening. After listening for a while in the main hall of the inn, he returned to rest. The next day, Su Zimo woke up early and rushed to Sky Treasure Auction House. Sky Treasure Auction House was divided into an inner and outer house. Most of the items in the outer house were relatively ordinary items that cultivators could purchase with spirit stones or barter. The inner house was where the true auctions were held. All rare items would be officially auctioned in the inner house with fair bidding and the highest bidder would win. As long as one entered the area of Sky Treasure Auction House, be it the inner or outer houses, no one was allowed to fly. Even perfected Jean Dan was not allowed, that was the rule of the auction house. The crowd was so crowded that their shoulders brushed against each other. There were cultivators from various sects and sections. In fact, Su Zimo even saw a few cultivators from Iridescent Cloud's Palace and Azure Frost sect. After walking around the outer square, Su Zimo's horizons were broadened. He did see a lot of treasures, but unfortunately, he didn't see any manuals on refining and tempering techniques. Su Zimo did not hesitate and walked towards the door of the inner house. Two late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators stood guard on either side of the gate. They wore armor and had sharp gazes as they scanned the crowd. Such guards could be seen everywhere in the Sky Treasure Auction House. Even if Jinren Jean Dan were to cause trouble here, he would be mercilessly suppressed. Su Zimo had just walked up the stairs when he was stopped by two guards. "Please show us your Sky Treasure token," one of them said coldly. Su Zimo was stunned and asked, "You still need a Sky Treasure token?" The other guard explained patiently, "Tokens of different colors have different seating areas in the inner square as well. Bronze tokens are the worst and gold tokens are the best." Su Zimo truly did not know that he had to show his Sky Treasure token to enter the inner square. In reality, the inner square was not a place where anyone could enter. The Sky Treasure token was the only way to prove that someone was qualified to participate in the inner square auction. Otherwise, who knew if they were trying to take advantage of the situation? Furthermore, most cultivators who could obtain a Sky Treasure token would have bought and sold a certain amount of items at Sky Treasure Pavilion. That was also proof of their identity and strength. At this moment, even Misty Peak Sect token was not as useful as a Sky Treasure token. Su Zimo did have a Sky Treasure token, and it was a Sky Treasure Gold token. However, ever since he found out about Ji Yaoshua's identity, Su Zimo had not used the gold token, worried that it would attract unnecessary trouble. However, given the current situation, Su Zimo had no choice but to take out the Sky Treasure Gold token and hand it over. The guard took a look and could not help but frown when he saw that it was a Sky Treasure Gold token. Typically speaking, given Su Zimo's cultivation, it was already rather rare for someone at early-stage Foundation establishment to be able to obtain a Sky Treasure Silver token. Only perfected Jean Dan could obtain a Sky Treasure Gold token. Only perfected Jean Dan was worthy of a gold token. The guard's first reaction was that the Sky Treasure Gold token was fake. Without batting an eyelid, the guard pressed gently in the middle of the Sky Treasure Gold token. His expression relaxed slightly as he nodded to the other person. The Sky Treasure Gold token was real. It was not that there had never been fake Sky Treasure badges before, but none of them had been able to get away with it. The reason for that was that there was a unique mark in the middle of every Sky Treasure badge that could not be replicated by others. The guard knew the authenticity of the Sky Treasure badge with a single touch. That green-robed scholar's background is not simple. The elders in his family dote on him enough to give him a Sky Treasure Gold token when he's only at early-stage Foundation establishment, one of the guards muttered to himself and nodded to Su Zimo. He moved aside and handed the Sky Treasure gold token over at the same time. Su Zimo received the token and it slipped through the guard's hand. Just as it was about to leave his hand, the guard seemed to have sensed something and a cold glint flashed through his eyes as he suddenly grabbed the Sky Treasure gold token. Something was not right. When the corner of the Sky Treasure gold token slid past the guard's palm, he had clearly touched a word. The guard snatched the Sky Treasure gold token back and waved his hand. Instantly, a few more Foundation establishment cultivators appeared beside him. They surrounded Su Zimo with a murderous aura and unfriendly expressions. "What's wrong?" Su Zimo frowned and asked. The guard looked at Su Zimo and harumphed. Picking up the Sky Treasure gold token, he examined it carefully. At the bottom right corner of the Sky Treasure gold token, there was a word the size of a mosquito. As long as one focused their attention, they would be able to tell that it was the word Shui. The guard handed the Sky Treasure gold token to another person and his expression darkened. If the word Shui did not exist, the Sky Treasure gold token would be real. However, if it did, it would be way too fake. This was clearly the token of the great Zhou dynasty's third princess. How could it be in the hands of an outsider? How dare you forge a fake Sky Treasure gold token? You really don't know what's good for you. Take him down. Another guard shouted decisively after reading it. Hold on. Su Zimo was extremely calm as he said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, what right do you have to say that my token is fake? There's no proof. You've got to give me some evidence." There was no way the Sky Treasure gold token was fake. Su Zimo wanted to hear what the guard had to say. The guard sneered. "All right, I'll let you know the reason for your death today." Just as that person was about to speak, a commotion broke out not far away as the crowd stirred. Glancing from the corner of his eye, the guard shuddered and revealed a respectful expression. In fact, there was even a hint of intoxication in the depths of his eyes. It was the same for everyone else, forgetting about Su Zimo for the moment. Curious, Su Zimo looked over. Chapter 155. A group of maidservants escorted two women over. The woman at the front had snow-white skin and peerless looks. She had a voluptuous figure and exquisite curves, exuding a mature and seductive charm with every step she took. She had a smile on her face and her every move exuded a graceful aura. It was clear that she had a high status in Sky Treasure auction house. Beside this woman, there was a young girl in a pink dress. Although her face was covered with a veil, only a pair of beautiful eyes could be seen. When she looked around, it was clear and crystalline. It was simply captivating. The young girl wore a long dress that accentuated her slender figure. Her waist was slender and curvaceous. Both women had their own merits and were rare beauties. Walking side by side, they looked like a pair of sisters. The moment they appeared, they attracted everyone's attention with a fiery passion. Gulping sounds could be heard from the surroundings. It was a spectacular sight. To think that Chief Steward Gu would come to Sky Treasure Auction House in Chiyu City. Chief Steward Gu is truly a beauty of the great Zhou dynasty. Each time I see her, I have an uncontrollable desire to conquer her. I'm willing to sacrifice 10 years of my lifespan if she can give me a night of pleasure. Someone like you wants to be under Chief Steward Gu's skirt. I heard that there was a perfected Jean Dan who had ill intentions and was killed that night. His corpse was hung on the city walls for an entire month. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's hearing was far superior to others. Although the discussions were suppressed to the point of being as soft as flies, he still caught them. So, it's her. Su Zimo muttered to himself. When he arrived in Chiyu City yesterday, Su Zimo heard many people talking about this woman. Gu Shi, the chief steward of Sky Treasure Auction House. Her background was mysterious and it was said that even the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty was respectful towards her. At least half of the reason why Sky Treasure Auction House was so famous was because of Gu Shi. Nobody knew about her cultivation. However, for so many years, no one who dared to harbor ill intentions towards her survived. Mysterious, noble, and beautiful. When these words were combined together, Gu Shi became the most famous beauty in the great Zhou dynasty. She could only be admired from afar and could not be touched. After all, the Sky Treasure Auction House in Chiyu City was not the main auction house. Su Zimo did not expect to meet Chief Steward Gu here. Who is that girl in pink beside Chief Steward Gu? She looks very unfamiliar. Nonsense, she's wearing a veil. How can you recognize her? Even though she's wearing a veil, I still feel like my soul has left my body. If I can see her face, I can die without regrets. Many people in the crowd turned their attention to the girl in pink. Su Zimo had used his spirit-peering art to look at the two women earlier on. He could not even detect the cultivation realm of the girl in pink, let alone Gu Shi. It was as if this woman was shrouded in a layer of fog, making it impossible for others to see her clearly. Right then, Gu Shi's gaze landed on Su Zimo. Pausing for a moment, she asked, "What's wrong?" "Chief Steward, this lad forged a fake Sky Treasure gold badge and wanted to get away with it. We discovered him." One of the guards hurried forward and presented Su Zimo's Sky Treasure gold badge with both hands, bowing respectfully. Smiling, Gu Shi accepted the Sky Treasure gold badge casually and looked at Su Zimo with a fake smile. "You look rather delicate, but you've got guts. There's nothing much to say. Let's do it according to the rules and kill this person." Before Gu Shi could finish, her expression changed slightly. Frowning slightly, she brought the Sky Treasure gold badge closer to take a look. After a moment, Gu Shi raised her head and looked at Su Zimo with a scrutinizing gaze with a strange expression. "Auntie Gu, what's wrong?" The girl in pink at the side asked softly when she sensed the strange atmosphere. The girl in pink's voice was seductive and pleasant to the ears. Gu Shi glanced sideways and remained silent. However, a voice sounded in the girl in pink's mind, "This badge should be real, but I don't know how it ended up in this person's hands. Take a look." Only those who had stepped into the nascent soul realm could use this kind of voice transmission technique. The girl in pink received the badge and was slightly stunned when she saw the word "Shui" at the bottom right corner. In the blink of an eye, she seemed to have thought of something as her lips curled under the veil and her eyes shone with a strange glint. The girl in pink whispered into Gu Shi's ear, "This badge is real. I know who this person is now. Auntie Gu, call him up. I have something to talk to him about." Gu Shi nodded and handed the Sky Treasure gold medallion back. "This medallion is real." "Ah. Real?" The two guards from earlier were stunned on the spot. This was clearly the badge of the great Zhou dynasty's third princess. If it was real, what was the relationship between this person and the third princess? Don't make wild guesses and gossip. As though she could tell what the two guards were thinking, Gu Shi said coldly. The two guards were shocked and nodded hurriedly. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. The moment he put away the Sky Treasure gold badge, he felt a burning gaze. Gu Shi and the girl in pink were both looking at him. Although the girl in pink was wearing a veil, Su Zimo could almost see her smiling face behind the veil. "Follow me." Suddenly, an unquestionable voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind, it was Gu Shi's. Gu Shi and the girl in pink headed towards the side door of the inner house. Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before following them. Only members of the inner house were qualified to enter through the side door of the inner house. Outsiders could only hand over their Sky Treasure gold badges and enter through the main door. But now that Su Zimo followed behind Gu Shi and the girl in pink and entered through the side door, it caused an uproar. "Who's that green-robed scholar? Why?" Many people's eyes turned red from watching. Someone coughed gently and strode towards the side door as though nothing had happened. However, he was stopped by the guards on the spot. After a fruitless argument, that person could only leave in a huff. After entering the inner house, it was much quieter and the number of people had decreased significantly. Gu Shi and the girl in pink walked at the front while Su Zimo followed behind calmly. He did not say anything and merely sized up his surroundings. The entire layout of the inner house was like a gigantic funnel and the surrounding guest seats were divided into 3 regions based on their colors. The seats at the bottom were bronze and those with Sky Treasure bronze badges sat right next to each other without much space to move around. Above the bronze were the silver seats that were relatively spacious. A few more levels up was the gold region. This time around, it was divided into individual rooms that were embedded with beautiful crystals. Although one could not see in from the outside, one could see everything clearly from the inside. Above the gold region, there was a circle of individual rooms that looked even more spacious and majestic from the outside. It was unknown who prepared them for. Beautiful girls stood on both sides of the doors of the uppermost rooms.